Chapter 3893. It's really Kang Juandar from the Jianglong state. Liu Hong's beautiful eyes narrowed as she felt incredulous. In fact, when Ku Xinjue first mentioned the blue-clothed youth's name, she had already suspected it. However, she wasn't sure and thought it was just someone with the same name. Now it seemed that she was thinking too much. Everyone in the team began to talk, their eyes filled with awe. Obviously, they had all heard of Kang Juandar's reputation. Zhuowen was a little puzzled as it was the first time he had heard of Kang Juandar. Junior sister Ziling, do you know where Kang Juandar came from? Is he very famous? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Ziling looked at Zhuowen in surprise and asked, Senior brother Daowen, you don't know who Kang Juandar is? Zhuowen shook his head seriously. He really didn't know anything about Kang Juandar. After Ziling confirmed that Zhuowen really didn't know who Kang Juandar was, she looked at him strangely and slowly explained Kang Juandar's origin. Many geniuses from the various states under the jurisdiction of the Liyuan main state would come to participate in this entrance trial. Hongwu Shengzon subschools were spread all over these states, so their sphere of influence was naturally uneven. Among the many subsects in the various provinces, there were 3 subsects that were publicly recognized as the 3 strongest subsects. These 3 subschools were located in the Jianglong state, Feihong state, and Fenghua state. The foundation and power of these 3 subsects were above the Hongwu divine sect in the Wukong region. The Hongwu divine sect could only be ranked 4th among the subsects, below the 3 subsects. Naturally, the 3 subschools had also sent their most outstanding disciples to participate in the competition. The disciples of these 3 subschools were known as the strongest geniuses of this entrance trial. Kang Juandar was one of them. He was the most outstanding disciple in the Jianglong state subschool, and his cultivation had reached the mid-stage of the yin-yang transformation. In addition to Kang Juandar, there were 2 others, Wang Wenhong from the Feihong state and Ming Yingwu from the Fenghua state. These 2 were very strong, not weaker than Kang Juandar. Zhuowen nodded. He was even more afraid of Hongwu Shengzon now. Hongwu Shengzon's background could be seen from the fact that a mere subschool could cultivate a yin-yang transformation middle stage junior. The true geniuses of Hongwu Shengzon were even more terrifying. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart sank. He knew that with how strong Hongwu Shengzon was, it wouldn't be easy for him to save Hong Shenwu. However, he wasn't someone who would give up so easily. He had to make a careful plan when he entered Hongwu Shengzon this time. He wouldn't act blindly without thinking. Saving Hong Shenwu was his top priority. Of course, other than investigating Hong Shenwu, he also had another mission, which was to get close to the number 1 spirit master of words in Liyuan main region and have him divine Moyan Wushang's exact location for him. Just as Zhuowen was deep in thought, a dazzling light flashed from the Hongwu main hall at the end of the square. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in the sky above the square. Everyone looked up and discovered that the original body of this stream of light was an old man with a cold expression. The old man's aura was extremely vast. In the void behind him, there were many anomalies. Within the strange phenomenon, there was an extremely huge earth fiend god phantom standing there. Of course, this phantom was faintly discernible and wasn't very clear. Demonic transformation expert. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. This wasn't the first time he had seen an expert in the demonic transformation realm. The most obvious characteristic of a demonic transformation realm cultivator was that their body contained the power of a godly demon. As they walked, the godly demon aura would circulate around their body, forming a terrifying phantom of a godly demon. Of course, a powerful demonic transformation expert could freely control the godly demon aura within their body. This old man's aura was somewhat stiff, unable to conceal the powerful godly demon aura within his body. It was obvious that he had just entered the demonic transformation realm and was unable to control the godly demon aura within his body. On the square, many cultivators had already sensed the godly demon aura within the old man's body. Their faces turned pale as they felt the pressure. Ziling, Su Rong, and the rest who were standing beside Zhuowen were even more unbearable. Their foreheads and bodies were covered in cold sweat, soaking their clothes. Their bodies were trembling and their faces were pale. Everyone, I am the examiner in charge of your entrance trial. Allow me to introduce myself. I am one of the 10 elders of Hongwu Shengzon, the Grand Elder of Longxiang Hall, Pei Shanglong. The old man's voice wasn't loud, but to everyone's ears, it was like a clap of thunder, exploding and reverberating in their minds. I didn't think that the trial would be supervised by an elder of the 10 halls. It seems like Hongwu Shengzon places a lot of importance on this trial. Ku Xinjue's eyes were solemn as he muttered to himself. Looking at the old man floating in the air, his face was filled with respect. He. This trial is getting more and more interesting. Kang Juanda, who was standing on the other side of the square, smiled with interest. Pei Shanglong looked down at the crowd, paused for a moment, and continued, the format of this trial is relatively free. I will send you to a small world. The specific rules will naturally appear in the jade slip that will be issued to you when you arrive at the small world. Pei Shanglong waved his sleeves, and suddenly, streaks of jade light swept out from his sleeves like rain and fell one after another. These streaks of jade light, as if they were sentient, swept toward every cultivator in the square. A streak of jade light quickly swept over and landed in Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen only felt his palm was cold, and then there was a thumb-sized jade slip lying quietly in his palm. This jade slip was whiter than snow, and it was warm to the touch. At first glance, one could tell that it was not made of ordinary jade. Ziling, Su Rong, and the others beside him each had a jade slip in their hands. Engrave your names on the jade slip, Pei Shanglong calmly ordered. No one refused, and one by one, they used their fingers as pens and engraved their names on the surface of the jade slip. After everyone had engraved their names, Pei Shanglong waved his sleeves again, and everyone felt a surge of suction, and then the space around them shattered and they were sucked in. Zhuowen only felt darkness in front of his eyes, and then there was a feeling of the world spinning. When he opened his eyes again, he found that he was no longer in Hongwu Square. The environment around him was similar to some kind of stone forest. Chapter 3894. Everyone, the darkness in this pocket world is even more terrifying than the Liyuan main region. Once night falls, even a God-realm change powerhouse can't guarantee their own safety. Pei Shanglong hovered high above the stone forest, silently overlooking the crowd below. However, his words caused a huge uproar. When they were on the Sea King, they had seen how terrifying the night in the Liyuan main region was. However, the darkness in this pocket world was even more terrifying than the Liyuan main region. It would be difficult for cultivators like them to survive in such darkness. This was not a trial at all. It was a hopeless road to death. Even the arrogant Ku Xinjue and Kang Juanda could not help but frown after hearing Pei Shanglong's words. You can rest assured that the trial is not for you to die. In this pocket world, there are a total of 108 halls. These halls contain light sources that can dispel the darkness. However, the darkness in this pocket world is getting stronger by the day. If you want to survive the trial, you must snatch the light sources of the other halls. According to the rules of this trial, you must stay in this pocket world for a month. If you want to survive this month unscathed, I estimate that you will need at least the light sources of 10 halls. I have already told you the details of the trial. What to do next is all up to you. After a month, I will open this pocket world again. The rest of you will be considered to have passed the trial and qualified to join the Hongwu Shengzon. Pei Shanglong was expressionless from beginning to end. After he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and disappeared before everyone's eyes in the blink of an eye. It can't be. There are only 108 halls in this pocket world, and there are tens of thousands of people participating in the trial. The elimination rate is too high. Ziling was stunned. She finally realized the cruelty of the Hongwu Shengzon trial. This is only the beginning. As time goes by, the cultivators who obtain the halls will inevitably start a war with the other halls in order to continue living here. In the end, I don't know if there will be even 100 people who will survive. Su Rong's eyes were lifeless. His body was trembling. He knew that their team was finished. Among these 10,000 cultivators, 5 elements transformation cultivators could be found everywhere. They were basically a team of noobs that could be crushed with a single finger. So what if Zhuowen had reached the 5 elements transformation stage? Among this group of geniuses, This kind of cultivation was simply at the bottom. Are you going to give up before it even starts? Zhuowen looked at the depressed Ziling, Su Rong, and the other three. Ziling gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, I won't give up. Since I've decided to participate in this trial, I'm naturally prepared to die. The eyes of Su Rong and the other two flickered. Suddenly, Su Rong cupped his hands at Zhuowen and said hesitantly, Brother Dao Wen, we're preparing to join Kuxinjue and the others. Why don't you come with us? Zhuowen looked coldly at Su Rong and shook his head. I've already offended Kuxinjue. Are you trying to humiliate me by asking me to join them? Su Rong's eyes flashed. Actually, before we entered this place, Liu Hong sent us a voice transmission saying that she's willing to accept us. As long as Brother Dao Wen lowers his head and apologizes to Li Miao, they'll. Before Su Rong could finish, Zhuowen coldly interrupted him. Brother Su, since you're planning to join Kuxinjue and Li Miao, you can leave. My team doesn't welcome you. Zhuowen said coldly. Su Rong frowned and shook his head. Brother Dao Wen, you really don't know what's good for you. Chen Li and Zhu Yuan agreed to join Li Miao yesterday. As he spoke, Su Rong looked at Ziling and said, Senior Sister Ziling, come with us. Brother Dao Wen's strength is not bad, but compared to Kuxinjue and the others, there's still a big gap. Zhuowen looked on coldly. He didn't even look at Ziling. This team was originally proposed by Ziling, and Su Rong and the others had taken the initiative to join their team. He had never planned to form a team. Since they wanted to leave, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't persuade them to stay. Ziling looked at Zhuowen and then looked at Li Miao and Liu Hong, who were not far away. No, Brother Su, I still plan to team up with Senior Brother Dao Wen. To Zhuowen's surprise, Ziling chose to stay. Su Rong shook his head and didn't try to persuade her. Instead, he led Chen Li and Zhu Yuan to Li Miao's team. Senior Brother Dao Wen, didn't Kuxinjue and the others not accept cultivators below the 5 elements change stage? Why did they accept Su Rong and the others? Ziling looked at the backs of Su Rong and the others, puzzled. It's just Li Miao's little scheme. We don't have to meddle in other people's business. Junior Sister Ziling, since you've chosen to trust me, I'll help you pass this trial, Zhuowen said seriously to Ziling. Zhuowen had a good impression of Ziling and had already decided to help her pass the trial. Ziling nodded and smiled bitterly in her heart. She didn't have much confidence in Zhuowen's strength. The only reason she was willing to stay was because she was a person of principle. She had already agreed to team up with Zhuowen. Even if she didn't believe in Zhuowen's strength, she naturally wouldn't change her mind at the last minute. At that moment, the cultivators in the stone forest had already begun to form their own groups and rush out of the stone forest in different directions. They weren't idiots. Since Pei Shanglong had said that there were 108 halls here, each hall must be able to accommodate a lot of people. Competing for the halls here, wouldn't it be suicide to fight alone? Unless it was a super genius like Kang Juanda, whose strength far exceeded everyone else's. Therefore, they were all forming their own groups to strengthen their own teams, hoping to increase their chances of winning this trial. Of course, this kind of forming was limited to the scope of their respective states. As for cultivators from different states, it was difficult to form a cooperation. After all, they weren't stupid. They knew that those who weren't of their own race must be killed. This was also why Kuxinjue and Li Miao were willing to rope in Su Rong and the others. Zhuowen had thoroughly offended them, so naturally, they couldn't lower their faces to rope in Zhuowen. When Li Miao saw Su Rong and the others, he couldn't help but frown and ask in a low voice, "Where's Ziling?" Su Rong trembled in fear and said submissively, "Senior Brother Li, Ziling plans to stay with Dao Wen and doesn't want to join our team. We can't persuade her." Li Miao was extremely displeased and scolded, "You three are useless. You can't even handle such a small matter. What's the use of having you?" Su Rong and the others trembled in fear. Although they felt humiliated, in order to survive the trial, they had to endure this humiliation and firmly follow Li Miao and Kuxinjue. Chapter 3895. The small world was extremely vast, and most of the terrain here was grey. As far as the eye could see, there were deserts, wastelands, stone forests, and other relatively desolate terrains. After Zhuowen and Ziling rushed out of the stone forest, they rushed toward the southwest. Heh! Senior brother Dawen, look, new information has appeared in our jade slip. This information actually records the specific locations of the 108 palaces in this small world. Ziling suddenly exclaimed, and Zhuowen heard this and took out the jade scroll on his body. After his spiritual force landed on the jade slip, he indeed found new information in the jade slip. Just as Ziling had said, the information was a map of the 108 temples. Zhuowen also noticed that nearly half of the 108 temples had turned red, and the rest were still green. These two colors also had corresponding descriptions in the jade scroll. The red led to the main hall that had been occupied by someone else. The remaining green ones had not been occupied yet. Brother Dawen, the location of the temples is marked in the jade scroll. Ziling was worried. She had originally wanted to find a remote place, an inconspicuous temple, so that the competition would be much smaller. However, who would have thought that the jade slip would directly indicate the specific locations of the 108 palaces? Thus, no matter which palace they occupied, they would still be easily discovered by others. It's okay. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Let's occupy one of the temples first. About 100 miles in front of us, there is an unoccupied temple. Let's go to that temple first. Zhuowen's face was calm, and he took Ziling straight to the temple. Although Ziling was still worried, she knew that this was the only way to go. She looked at the sky and found that the sun was gradually setting in the west. It would not be long before night invaded the entire small world. At that time, if they could not enter the temple, they would not be able to get any protection, and the great horror in the darkness would completely tear them apart. An hour later, the two of them arrived at a large rift valley that stretched across several mountain peaks. In the depths of the rift valley, the outline of a temple was faintly discernible. Zhuowen and Ziling were both refreshed, and they knew that they had found the temple successfully. Senior brother Dawen, this palace has already turned red. Someone has occupied it before us. When they had just stepped into the rift valley, Ziling glanced at the jade scroll and could not help but be disappointed. So what? We'll just take it directly, Zhuowen said calmly. Ziling said dejectedly, none of the cultivators who participated in this trial are weak. Ziling felt that their cultivation was relatively weak, and if the one who occupied this temple was ruthless, they would be finished. Zhuowen looked calm and pointed to the sky and said, Sister Ziling, do you think we still have time to find the next temple? Only then did Ziling realize that the setting sun in the western sky was as red as blood. She was afraid that in less than half an hour, the setting sun would completely set, and the world would be plunged into terrible darkness. They really did not have time to search for the next temple. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. When the two stopped at the entrance of the rift valley, a gust of wind swept behind them, and in the blink of an eye, they passed by. More than a dozen people swept past them, rushing toward the temple in the depths of the rift valley. The leader of this group of people was a slightly plump young man, but his eyes were cold. The young man just looked at Zhuowen and Ziling coldly, and he did not intend to stop. If it were not for the sky being dark, according to his personality, he would have stopped to kill Zhuowen and Ziling to satisfy his somewhat perverted impulse to kill. Let's go too. Zhuowen was as calm as an ancient well. He led Ziling, who was obviously worried, towards the palace. After a while, they came close to the temple. The temple was not big, and the surface of the temple made of white jade looked a little shabby, and some parts were even a little damaged. Zhuowen also noticed that the white jade that made up the temple was not ordinary white jade, but something similar to fluorite. He guessed that the entire temple should be able to release a blazing light, and in the darkness, it should be able to dispel the terrible darkness of this world. The area of the temple was not large, and the space inside was quite narrow. Even if they squeezed, it would be difficult to accommodate nearly 100 people. The most suitable number of people for this temple should be about a dozen or so. At this moment, there were two groups of people at the entrance of the temple. One group of people was the group of plump young men who had just passed by Zhuowen. The other group of people was about 7 or 8 people, led by a burly man with a giant hammer on his back. In addition to these two groups of people, at the entrance of the temple, there was a beautiful woman whose appearance and beauty were impeccable. She frowned and looked at the two groups in front of the door. This beautiful female cultivator was surrounded by 10 young women, who were probably her companions. Zhuowen's arrival did not attract the attention of these three groups of people. They only glanced at him before withdrawing their gazes, and they did not pay much attention to him. Zhuowen and Ziling's cultivations were too ordinary, and there were only 2 of them. They were basically no threat to these three groups of people. Ma Junfeng, Miunc, don't go too far. I was the one who occupied this temple first. What right do you have to ask us to give it up? The beautiful female cultivator's beautiful eyes were icy cold, and her voice was as cold as ice. At the same time, waves of energy surged within her body, and the surrounding air seemed to have frozen, causing the temperature to drop rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the surroundings were like a world of ice and snow. There was no doubt that this cold female cultivator should have some kind of ice attribute Dao root, and her cultivation was not bad. She should be around the late stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. Ma Junfeng was the plump young man. His gaze was slightly fearful as he grinned and said, "The number 1 genius of Sky Snow Province, Li Xinbing, really lives up to her reputation. Your Yi Ice Dao root is formidable indeed, but do you think you alone are a match for me and brother Mi? And do you think your companions are a match for us? Junior sister Li, how about this? We won't make things difficult for you. You give up the temple, and we'll let you stay beside it. The temple's light should be able to cover an area of a few kilometers. This way, you'll be able to survive the night, right?" The tall and sturdy Miunc roared with laughter and said, "Junior sister Li, I think brother Ma's suggestion is good. It's beneficial to both of us, and we don't have to fight to the death, right?" Li Xinbing's beautiful eyes were icy cold. How could she not see what Ma Junfeng and Miunc were planning? If she really gave up the temple, how could Ma Junfeng and Miunc let her stay beside it? Chapter 3896. Junior Li, have you made up your mind? Ma Junfeng and Miunc took a step forward, forming a pincer formation in front of Li Xinbing. Their auras were as strong as rainbows. As long as Li Xinbing dared to make a move, they would immediately act. Just as the 3 of them were about to confront each other, Ma Junfeng suddenly glanced at Zhuowen and Ziling, who were enjoying the show not far away. "Wang Dao, Chen Yang, the 2 of you, take care of those 2 trash. Don't let them take advantage of us," Ma Junfeng said darkly. The 2 young men in Ma Junfeng's team nodded and smiled at Zhuowen and Ziling. Without saying a word, they rushed towards the 2 of them, their early-stage 5 elements change realm aura surging out. After Ma Junfeng gave the order, his attention was no longer on Zhuowen and Ziling. Instead, he was staring at Li Xinbing, who was standing at the door. Zhuowen and Ziling were both at the early stage of 5 elements change realm and the peak of Hollow God transformation respectively. It would be a piece of cake for him to send out 2 early-stage 5 elements change realm subordinates to take care of them. Miunc and Li Xinbing naturally didn't care about Zhuowen. Their confrontation had reached a critical point. If any of them made a move, it would immediately trigger a fight between the 3 of them. "Senior brother Dao Wen, let's retreat first." Ziling saw 2 young men in Ma Junfeng's team who were at the early stage of the 5 elements change. Their auras were strong, and they were headed straight for them. A trace of fear appeared in her eyes. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and sneered in his heart. This Ma Junfeng was really narrow-minded. They were just watching from the sidelines and he wanted to kill them. "Don't worry, it's just 2 grasshoppers." Zhuowen shook his head and walked forward slowly with a calm expression. It was as if he wasn't going to fight, but was instead taking a leisurely stroll in the back garden. This guy has a death wish. Wang Dao and Chen Yang saw Zhuowen's arrogant behavior and their hearts were filled with disdain. However, their attacks didn't slow down at all. In fact, they were even more aggressive. They wanted to beat this pretentious young man into a pulp. When they arrived in front of Zhuowen, they saw Zhuowen slowly throw out a punch. This punch was very slow and weak. They laughed, laughing from the bottom of their hearts. However, this ridicule did not last for long. Their faces stiffened, and a piercing pain appeared in their hearts. Then, they saw two phantoms of fist energy land on their chests. That was the shadow of Zhuowen's fist. Because it was too fast, they could only see the shadow. Zhuowen had already retracted his fist and was looking at them calmly. How could it be, so fast? This was the last thought that appeared in their minds. Then, they spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards in a sorry state. The two figures smashed into the entrance of the palace. The three people who were originally facing each other at the door seemed to have sensed something. When they saw the two figures smashing towards them, they immediately withdrew their auras and retreated separately. Boom! These two figures heavily smashed into the palace's entrance, smashing the steps to the palace's entrance into pieces. Furthermore, in the ruins of the steps, they were constantly twitching and bleeding from their 7 orifices. Even if they weren't dead, they were already crippled. Ma Junfeng looked at the two twitching figures, his pupils constricting to the extreme. This was because these two were none other than Wang Dao and Chen Yang, the two people he had sent to kill Zhuowen and Ziling. He turned his head to look at Zhuowen and Ziling and found that they were unharmed. This guy, Ma Junfeng, was shocked. How did these two do it? How did they manage to defeat Wang Dao and Chen Yang in the blink of an eye? His mind was completely focused on Li Xinbing, so he didn't pay attention to Wang Dao and Chen Yang's battle. He didn't know how they were defeated. My UNC looked at Zhuowen with some confusion. He also did not understand how a mere early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator could defeat 2 early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivators in such a short time. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen curiously. She happened to be standing at the entrance and saw more than my UNC and Ma Junfeng. She knew that Zhuowen's strength was not just that of an early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator. This seemingly ordinary young man actually gave her a lot of pressure when he burst out with his energy. It was as if a sword was suddenly hanging by her neck. That sense of crisis made her feel very uncomfortable. She also knew that this young man was very strong. He was probably stronger than her, Ma Junfeng, and my UNC. Zhuowen walked slowly towards Ma Junfeng. As he walked, he looked at Ma Junfeng and said calmly, "These two are your subordinates. Did you send them to kill us?" Zhuowen walked very slowly, but his voice was very cold. It made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Ma Junfeng's eyes narrowed. This young man killed 2 of his subordinates, and now he was questioning him. This was too much. A mere early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator. Even if he was stronger, how could he be a match for a late-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator? Who do you think you are? How dare you question me? I'll give you a chance. Kneel in front of me and break your own arms. Perhaps I'll spare your life and forget about the fact that you killed my subordinates. Ma Junfeng's eyes were cold. The aura of a late-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator completely erupted from his body. The power of the 5 elements transformed into 5 different types of energy that revolved around his back, forming a 5-colored ring. This was the physical appearance of the 5 elements transformation cultivator. It was called the 5 elements ring. Hee, break your own arms. Zhuowen laughed. But not only was his laughter cold, it was also filled with dense killing intent. Then, like a ferocious beast, he took a step forward and shot towards Ma Junfeng like an arrow. You're courting death. Ma Junfeng was both shocked and furious. He didn't expect this early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator to be so ignorant. He actually dared to attack him. Ma Junfeng was really angry. He wanted to cripple this young man and then torture him to death. Rumble. Suddenly, the two of them collided. Ma Junfeng was shocked to find that his attack was instantly broken. He let out a muffled groan and retreated. Just as he was retreating, a palm suddenly swept over and grabbed his right hand. You want me to break my own arms? A cold voice sounded in his ears. Then, the hand exerted force and Ma Junfeng's right arm was completely twisted. The intense pain caused Ma Junfeng to scream involuntarily. But it wasn't over. The hand grabbed his left hand like a ghost and exerted force again. The crisp sound of bones cracking was heard again. His left arm was also twisted and shattered. Ma Junfeng let out a shrill cry. His arms were crippled in the blink of an eye. Finally, fear rose in his heart. Where did this young man come from? How could he have such terrifying strength? The moment his arms were crippled, the hand clenched into a fist and slammed into the 5 elements ring on his back. A surging mighty force erupted, and Ma Junfeng could only watch as his 5-element ring was smashed into pieces. No, with the 5 elements ring broken, Ma Junfeng was basically crippled. His 5 elements transformation technique was about to dissipate and he would slowly become a cripple. Sadly, Zhuowen didn't have the slightest bit of pity. He grabbed him by the collar and threw him to the ground. Then, he quickly crushed his kneecaps and forced him to kneel before him. Break your own arms and apologize on your knees. Is that what you said? Chapter 3897. Everyone stared blankly at the scene in front of them as if they had been petrified. Ma Junfeng threatened to have Zhuowen break his own arms and kneel down to apologize. He was insufferably arrogant. Everyone thought that Ma Junfeng had the right to do so. After all, Ma Junfeng was at the late stage of 5 elements transformation while Zhuowen was only at the early stage of 5 elements transformation. The difference in their cultivation levels was obvious. But now, Ma Junfeng, who they thought would win, was easily defeated, had his arms broken, and was kneeling in front of Zhuowen who was only at the 5 elements transformation stage. The roles of the two were suddenly reversed. So strong, Ziling was in a daze for a while. Then, her face lit up with joy. She finally understood that Zhuowen's confidence did not come from arrogance, but from his own strength. He was only at the early stage of 5 elements transformation, but he could easily kill a late-stage 5 elements transformation master. Perhaps, she could really pass the test if she followed Zhuowen and joined Hongwu Shengzon. Thinking of this, Ziling couldn't help but feel excited. She knew that she had followed the right person. The hairs on my UNC and Li Xinbing's bodies stood on end as a chill ran down their spines. They stared at Zhuowen as if they had seen a ghost. Ma Junfeng, who was at the same level as them, was beaten up so badly by this ordinary youth. Who was this guy? How could he be so strong? Please let me live. Ma Junfeng spat out a mouthful of blood. He bent his body with difficulty and kowtowed a few times to Zhuowen, stuttering as he spoke. Ma Junfeng was terrified. He knew that he had met a tough opponent this time. Even though he was only at the early stage of 5 elements transformation, his strength was far beyond his own. He didn't dare to provoke such a ruthless person, so he begged Zhuowen for mercy. Get lost. Zhuowen glanced coldly at Ma Junfeng, but didn't kill him. Instead, he looked at my UNC. What? You want to stop me too? Zhuowen said calmly. My UNC's scalp went numb. He quickly smiled and retreated to the side. What a joke. Ma Junfeng was beaten up so badly. His strength was on par with Ma Junfeng. If he went up now, he would be courting death. After my UNC stepped aside, Zhuowen walked straight to the entrance. His gaze landed on Li Xinbing who was blocking the entrance. Li Xinbing's beautiful eyes were filled with dread. Her delicate hands were clenched together nervously. Her heart was filled with both fear and unwillingness. Of her, of course. Senior Sister Li, forget it. We. Behind Li Xinbing came a sweet-looking young woman. She bit her lip and put her right hand on Li Xinbing's shoulder. Li Xinbing shook her head. She looked at the ordinary-looking young man in front of her and said softly, Senior brother, I see that there are only 2 of you. There is still space in this hall. I am willing to share it with you. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen nervously. Although the hall wasn't big, it could accommodate more than 10 people. Li Xinbing's team only had 10 people in total. It was more than enough for Zhuowen and Ziling to live in. Zhuowen glanced at Li Xinbing and didn't say anything. He turned to Ziling and asked, Junior Sister Ziling, what do you think? Ziling came back to her senses and immediately came to Zhuowen's side. She looked at Li Xinbing and the 9 trembling female cultivators behind her. Senior brother Dao Wen, the hall is not small anyway. As long as they don't get in our way, there is no need to drive them out, Ziling said nervously. Ever since Zhuowen showed his strength and easily defeated Ma Junfeng, her attitude towards Zhuowen became more cautious and cautious. Zhuowen didn't care about Ziling's change in attitude towards him. He nodded and said, "In that case, let's enter the hall. As long as you don't get in our way, we will not do anything to you." After that, Zhuowen led Ziling and Li Xinbing into the hall. Although the hall was small, due to the architectural style, it didn't look cramped. In front of the hall, there was a headless statue. Zhuowen pulled Ziling along and sat down on the futon in front of the statue. At that moment, the sun outside the hall was about to sink into the ground. The sky was dark, as if it was engulfing the land. My UNC's expression changed slightly. He walked forward and said to Li Xinbing, "Junior sister Li, I am willing to join your team. You should also know that in the land of trials, you don't just need to find a palace to smoothly survive for a month. After this, the number of halls will only decrease, and the competition will only get more intense. If I join your team's strength will increase a lot. Won't that increase your chances of passing the trial?" Li Xinbing's beautiful eyes moved. She looked at Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the statue. Seeing that he didn't have any objections, she couldn't help but be moved. She also understood that there were many capable people in this trial. Although a late-stage 5 elements transformation stage was good, the chances of passing the trial were still relatively small. In fact, if my UNC joined them, their strength would increase a lot. There is not much space in the hall. At most, it can only accommodate 3 more people. Li Xinbing looked at the dozen people behind my UNC and said hesitantly. My UNC laughed heartily and said, "I will only bring 2 people into the palace. The rest of you can wait outside the palace. As long as you are within the range of the light source, I believe that the things in the darkness won't dare to do anything to us." Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen's back. Seeing that he still didn't have any reaction, she was completely relieved and nodded. "Then we welcome Brother Mai to our team." My UNC heaved a sigh of relief. He picked 2 of the strongest cultivators in his group and followed Li Xinbing into the hall. However, after entering the hall, Li Xinbing and my UNC sat far away from Zhuowen. Thinking back to how Zhuowen crippled Ma Junfeng with one move, they still had lingering fear in their hearts. They were full of respect for Zhuowen. The remaining cultivators in my UNC's team stayed outside the hall. They didn't have any complaints. After all, they were weaker and understood that the treatment they received was different. The most miserable one was Ma Junfeng. At this moment, he was being supported by 2 of his companions. The group leaned against the wall beside the hall. Ma Junfeng's 5 elements ring was broken and his limbs were crippled. Even if he recovered from his injuries, he was basically a cripple. If Ma Junfeng was in the outside world, his elders could still bring him away. However, he was still in the trial grounds. If he couldn't survive a month, Ma Junfeng would definitely die. Chapter 3898. Hoo hoo hoo. A mournful cold wind blew. Night had completely fallen. The outside world had completely sunk into pitch-black darkness. As the darkness engulfed them, the palace in the depths of the Great Rift Valley began to emit a faint light. Zhuowen raised his head and slowly looked at the headless statue in front of him. The headless statue emitted a blazing light. This light rushed to the top of the palace and scattered into countless light spots. They spread out in all directions and instantly enveloped the entire palace. If it weren't for the fact that he was in front of the statue, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to see through this mystery. It seemed that the headless statue was the main source of light for the temple. Zhuowen also noticed that the palace's radiance was extremely exuberant. It spread out and enveloped an area of 1 mile outside the palace. Ma Junfeng and the rest, who had been waiting outside the hall with apprehensive hearts, sighed softly when they felt the light enveloping them. They knew that as long as they stayed within 1 mile of the palace tonight, they would not be in any danger. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He looked through the door into the darkness a mile away. For some reason, he had a feeling that the darkness in this small world was unusual. Thinking of this, Zhuowen secretly circulated the grand mist god force in his body and gathered it in his eyes. In an instant, his eyes pierced through the darkness and saw the scene in the depths of the darkness. Zhuowen broke out in cold sweat the moment he saw this. In the darkness, evil spirits stood in great numbers, running like the wind. In Zhuowen's eyes, the aura of these evil spirits was vigorous and strange. They were not inferior to the two double-level evil spirits, Prodo and Salado, that he had encountered in the central province. In other words, in this darkness, the weakest one was a Do-level evil spirit. Zhuowen broke out in cold sweat. It seemed that Pei Shanglong hadn't deceived him. The darkness of this small world was even more terrifying than the Li Yuan main region. Farther away from the Great Rift Valley, Zhuowen saw a gigantic evil spirit that was hundreds of feet tall. It was far more terrifying than the other evil spirits. This demonic beast had the head of a wild boar, and its two pitch-black fangs were densely covered in black patterns. His fat belly rippled like the surface of a lake as he walked. Wherever this pig-head evil spirit passed by, the fighting-level evil spirits around it would make way for it and hide at the side, trembling in fear. Warrior-level demonic charm, Zhuowen's gaze turned serious. He could tell at a glance that the strength of this pig-head evil spirit was far beyond the fighting-level evil spirit. Its level should be above the fighting level. Zhuowen had a bad feeling because he realized that the pig-headed evil spirit was heading straight for the palace in the depths of the Great Rift Valley. Boom! Boom! The pig head walked closer and closer. Every step he took caused the ground to tremble. The people who were originally resting in the hall naturally felt this unusual vibration. What happened? Li Xinbing and Miunc were the first to react. They immediately walked to the entrance of the hall and peered into the darkness. However, the darkness blocked their vision and divine sense. They could not see the specific scenery in the darkness. They could only feel that there was a huge monster approaching the palace step by step. Boom! 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 The sound of the earth shaking got closer and closer. Finally, it stopped right in front of them. Everyone inside and outside the palace was nervous. They all knew that a huge monster had stopped at the edge of the palace, which happened to be the boundary of the light source. Ma Junfeng sighed and smiled. It should be an evil spirit. However, we have the palace's light source here. This evil spirit won't dare to come in. Before Ma Junfeng could finish speaking, a fat hand suddenly swept over from the edge of the light source. Like a bolt of black lightning, it flashed through the light source and caught Ma Junfeng in an instant. Ma Junfeng did not even have time to react before he was grabbed by the hand and dragged into the darkness. Immediately after, Ma Junfeng's tragic scream and the sound of some kind of beast chewing on its prey could be heard. The crunching sound of teeth crunching on bones was especially horrifying in the darkness. After a while, Ma Junfeng's screams stopped abruptly. The surroundings were silent. Senior brother Ma has been eaten. Outside the palace, a male cultivator's eyes were glazed over. He was so scared that he fell to the ground and almost peed his pants. His voice was filled with sobs. For a moment, everyone outside the palace was in a panic. They were terrified. The palace's light source could not block the evil spirit in the darkness. How terrifying was this evil spirit? Zhuowen stood up and came to the door of the palace. He silently looked at the pig-head evil spirit at the edge of the light source. He saw with his own eyes that Ma Junfeng was eaten by this evil spirit. Moreover, after eating Ma Junfeng, the evil spirit was not satisfied at all. It reached out its hand again and attacked Ma Junfeng's companions. Ma Junfeng's companions were not as strong as Ma Junfeng. How could they resist the evil spirit's hand? They could not resist for long before they were killed by the evil hand. Then, the evil hand rolled and dragged them all into the darkness. Senior brother Dao Wen, why is the darkness in this world so terrifying? Even the light source can't block it. What should we do? Ziling walked to Zhuowen's side. Her beautiful eyes were filled with fear and helplessness. Zhuowen did not make a sound. He silently looked at the evil pig eating heartily in the dark. Suddenly, he lifted his leg and walked towards the evil pig. Senior brother Dao Wen, come back quickly. Ziling saw Zhuowen walking towards the darkness and was scared out of her wits. She quickly called for Zhuowen to come back. Unfortunately, Zhuowen did not seem to hear her. He continued walking slowly. He needed to confirm his thoughts. Ma Yuanxi and Li Xinbing also saw Zhuowen's suicidal behavior. They were confused but did not stop him. Ma Yuanxi even thought that it would be best if Zhuowen died in the hands of the evil spirit in the darkness. The sound of chewing could be heard in the darkness. The evil pig head who was eating heartily also noticed Zhuowen, who was slowly walking over. His blood-red eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light. This human was really stupid. Since he sent himself to its doorstep, it would gladly accept it. Roar. The evil spirit roared and attacked with its demonic hand again, trying to grab Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a purple-gold light. He immediately saw the evil spirit's movement and took a step back, dodging the demonic hand. A look of surprise appeared on the pig's face. He did not expect this human to be able to dodge his attack. However, the evil spirit did not mind. It swung its demonic hand and tried to grab Zhuowen again. Zhuowen turned around and retreated into the temple. "You're crazy." Li Xinbing and Ma Yuanxi saw the demonic hand attracted by Zhuowen and retreated into the depths of the temple. Their eyes were filled with despair. Zhuowen pulled Ziling and landed in the temple. He silently looked at the demonic hand that was about to reach into the temple. Just as the demonic hand was about to reach the entrance of the temple, the headless statue in the temple suddenly emitted a blazing light. Chapter 3899. Roar. Roar. Bang. The gigantic demonic hand landed in front of the door. The evil spirit in the darkness turned around and ran away as if it had met its worst enemy. In an instant, the surrounding darkness, which was filled with cries and howls, became completely silent. The people in the hall, who were originally on tenterhooks, were stunned for a moment. Then, they all looked as if they had just survived a disaster. Senior brother Dawen, you already knew that the evil spirit in the darkness couldn't invade the hall? Ziling heaved a sigh of relief and came to Zhuowen's side. Her beautiful eyes shone as she looked at Zhuowen with admiration. When facing the demonic hand, Zhuowen was very calm from the beginning to the end. Such courage and grace filled Ziling's eyes with an indescribable charm. Inside the hall, Li Xinbing, Peng Li, Mi Yuanxi, and the others looked at Zhuowen with respect. Not only was this person powerful, but his temperament was also far better than theirs. At this moment, the unwillingness in their hearts had also vanished into thin air. They finally knew how big the gap between them and this young man was. "I'm not sure either. I remember Pei Shanglong said that as long as we can obtain the hall, we can survive by staying in the hall. That's why I wanted to give it a try. The hall in this small world is indeed extraordinary. Even if the evil spirit in the darkness is very strong, the hall is enough to protect the safety of the hall." This should be what Pei Shanglong meant when he said that. Zhuowen said calmly. Everyone fell silent and looked at the puddles of blood outside the hall that had yet to dry up. They also understood the meaning behind Zhuowen's words. The hall was indeed safe, but outside the hall was not as safe as in the darkness. Even if the hall's light source covered an area of 1 mile, the light outside the hall could indeed disperse some of the weaker evil spirits. However, it could not stop the truly powerful evil spirits. The cultivators outside the hall would still die. It had to be said that there was no loophole in this trial. Apart from Ma Junfeng and the others, as long as they stayed within 1 mile of the palace, they would be able to survive the terrifying darkness. Unfortunately, other than inside the hall, the terror of darkness was everywhere. Their lives had nowhere to hide, and in the end, there was only death. Ma Yuanxi was so scared that his back was drenched in cold sweat. Fortunately, he had an idea and reached an agreement with Li Xinbing before entering the hall. Otherwise, his fate would not be much better than Ma Junfeng's. At the same time, Mi Yuanxi also felt some sorrow in his heart. Other than the two who had entered the palace, the rest of his companions had also been killed by the evil spirit and became food for the evil spirit. Zhuowen strode out of the hall and arrived in front of the demonic hand. This demonic hand was extremely huge. It was about 30 to 40 feet long and about a meter thick. At this moment, dense surging demonic chi was emanating from the surface of the demonic hand, and the arm was still twitching and struggling. The 5 fingers of the huge palm that was like a cattail leaf fan moved together and slowly crawled towards the light source that was 1 li away. However, the light source in the palace suppressed the demonic hand greatly. The demonic hand's crawling speed could be described as the speed of a turtle. Zhuowen sneered and slashed out a spiritual sword intent from his forehead. The purple-gold divine sword whistled through the air and pierced into the center of the demonic hand without hesitation. The demonic hand struggled in pain, flailing wildly. However, the purple-gold divine sword was rooted to the ground, nailing the demonic hand to the ground. Zhuowen circled the demonic hand and carefully observed it for a while. He thought that if he could refine this demonic hand, his cultivation would increase greatly. The Universal Sutra of Heaven and Earth was Zhuowen's secret, so he naturally couldn't refine this demonic hand immediately. With a wave of his sleeve, he kept the demonic hand into the great world. Everyone in the palace saw Zhuowen's actions, but no one said anything. It was all thanks to Zhuowen that this demonic hand was severed here. In their eyes, this was Zhuowen's spoils of war, and there was no dispute about it. After putting away the demonic hand, Zhuowen entered the palace as if nothing had happened and sat cross-legged on the futon in front of the headless statue again. Ziling blushed and sat next to Zhuowen. Her body intentionally moved closer to Zhuowen. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen's back, and her beautiful eyes flickered. Suddenly, she gritted her teeth and walked in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen looked at the beautiful female cultivator in front of him in confusion and asked, "Is something the matter, fellow Daoist Li?" Although Zhuowen rarely interacted with Li Xinbing, he had learned of her name from their previous conversation. "Brother Daowen, you also know that this entrance trial is not simple. The longer we stay here, the more terrifying the darkness around us will be. If we want to continue living here, we have to fight for the light source with others. Only then can we survive." Before Li Xinbing could finish, she was interrupted by Zhuowen. He looked at Li Xinbing indifferently and said, "Fellow Daoist Li, are you saying that you want to rely on me?" Li Xinbing was stunned and her heart twitched. How did Daowen know that she wanted to rely on him? Li Xinbing forced a smile and said, "Brother Daowen, you might have misunderstood. I plan to join forces with you. After all, the more people there are, the more strength there is. Joining forces is beneficial to both of us." Zhuowen shook his head instead and said, "All of you are too weak. Joining forces with me is a burden to me, and you'll only drag me down. Unless you rely on me, perhaps I will protect you." Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen's matter-of-fact expression and felt an unknown anger rise in her heart. She admitted that Zhuowen was indeed stronger than everyone else in the palace, but in her opinion, he was only slightly stronger. After all, she was a powerhouse at the late stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. No matter how good Li Xinbing's temper was, she could not help but feel angry when she was called a burden. However, Li Xinbing suppressed her anger and said coldly, "Since Brother Daowen is not sincere, then forget about the alliance." After saying that, Lin Xinbing returned to her seat and sulked alone. Ziling carefully glanced at Li Xinbing, who was not looking too good, and said in a low voice, "Brother Daowen, I think Sister Li's suggestion is not bad. We can definitely join forces with them." Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Sister Ziling, you don't understand. Li Xinbing's strength is not bad, but in my opinion, they are useless. Moreover, bringing this group of people is a burden in itself." Since Zhuowen had already said so much, Ziling knew that there was no point in continuing. She simply shut her mouth and began to cultivate in silence. Chapter 3900. In the middle of the night, the darkness in the outside world grew thicker. Ghostly wails and howls resounded in the depths of the darkness. Inside the hall, it was quiet. All the cultivators were either cultivating or sitting cross-legged in meditation. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. With a thought, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared on the spot, entering the hidden great world. Inside the great world, life was full of vitality. Everything was revived, the land was vast, and the mountains were tall. Ever since the Great World had merged with the Supreme Wordstone, it had become stronger and more complete. Not only had the Great World's barrier become stronger, but the laws inside the Great World had also become more complete and advanced. As for Xiao Hei and the other two divine swords, they had benefited greatly from cultivating in the Great World. Their cultivation speed was extremely fast. Zhuowen landed in a valley. The devil hand he had just collected was inside this valley. When Zhuowen stepped into the valley, he immediately felt an extremely dense and terrifying devil qi. Zhuowen frowned slightly and rushed into the valley. Immediately, he saw the devil hand nailed to the ground by the purple-gold divine sword in the center of the valley. Monstrous devil qi erupted from the devil hand. This devil qi rose and intertwined, revealing billowing black devil flames. Under the burning of the devil flames, the solid barrier around the valley turned into nothingness. Moreover, the devil hand struggled fiercely, and its devil aura soared to the sky. The purple-gold divine sword trembled continuously, and it was beginning to lose its suppression of the devil hand. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He sent out several divine soul sword intents to completely suppress the devil hand. However, the devil hand was indeed fierce. Although it was nailed to the ground by several divine soul sword intents, it still struggled with all its might, and its devil aura was vast and mighty. Zhuowen's gaze turned solemn. He knew that the reason why the devil hand was so quiet in the hall was mainly because it was suppressed by the light source. Now that there was no light source in the Great World, it was unable to suppress the devil hand. Therefore, the devil hand was acting so unscrupulously. See if I don't refine you to death. Zhuowen harumphed coldly. Boundless grand mist godforce surged out from his body and turned into purple-gold flames that burned fiercely. In the blink of an eye, the purple-gold flames enveloped the devil hand. After being enveloped by the purple-gold flames, the devilish hand, which had been struggling fiercely, immediately stiffened. Then, it twitched violently as if in fear, trying to break free from the purple-gold divine sword and escape the purple-gold flames. Unfortunately, the purple-gold divine sword had nailed the demon hand so firmly that it had nowhere to hide. Creak, creak, creak. As the purple-gold flames continued to burn, the demonic hand emitted a strange sound. The demonic aura on its surface was gradually refined, turning into a vast and righteous aura that surged into Zhuowen's body. After the awe-inspiring vital energy entered Zhuowen's body, it transformed into the inherent divine power in his body, constantly increasing Zhuowen's cultivation. After an unknown period of time, the demonic hand was completely refined by Zhuowen, turning into the vast and righteous aura inside Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen stood up abruptly, and cracking noises came from his body. His aura rose steadily, becoming vast and boundless. I really didn't expect a mere demonic hand to contain such a vast amount of energy. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly. Although he had yet to break through, he was not far from it. If he could refine this demonic hand, his cultivation would advance another step, from the early 5 elements transformation realm to the mid-stage 5 elements transformation realm. Zhuowen lamented inwardly, but he knew that this was the arm of a warrior realm demonic spirit. Huang Xiaolong's current strength was not enough to deal with a demonic spirit of this level, not to mention refining it. With his current strength, he should be able to deal with a warrior realm demonic spirit, but a warrior realm demonic spirit was still lacking. However, Zhuowen also knew that as long as he continued to cultivate and improve his strength, he would not be afraid of a warrior realm demonic spirit. After all, he had the universal scripture of heaven and earth, and the vast and righteous aura was the nemesis of demonic spirits. The darkness of this small world was probably the most suitable place for him to cultivate. When Zhuowen left the small world, he found that the outside world was already bright. There was no one in the hall, not even Zi Bang. Suddenly, a wretched figure flew in from outside the palace and smashed into a wall inside the palace. Zhuowen looked over and found that it was a rather beautiful female cultivator. He could tell at a glance that this female cultivator was Li Xinbing's companion. Cough, cough, cough. The female cultivator coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood. Suddenly, she saw Zhuowen in the hall and was pleasantly surprised. Senior brother Dao Wen, please save senior sister Li and the others. the female cultivator said with a pale face. Zhuowen took out a divine healing pill, threw it to the female cultivator, and walked straight out of the hall. After the female cultivator fell into the hall, Zhuowen's divine will had already spread out, and he could clearly see the scene outside. He saw Li Xinbing, Minc, and the others fighting with a group of people outside. There were also more than 10 people in this group, and the leader was a young man with a haughty expression. This young man was not tall, and he was even a little short. His appearance was also somewhat ugly. However, this short young man's cultivation was not ordinary, and he was able to completely suppress both Li Xinbing and Minc by himself. A cultivator at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage? Zhuowen muttered to himself. He could tell at a glance that this short young man's cultivation was higher than Li Xinbing and Minc's. He was at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage. Moreover, the group of people brought by this short young man was stronger than Li Xinbing's group. There were even 2 late-stage 5 elements transformation stage cultivators among them. Li Xinbing's people were beaten back repeatedly, and many of them were seriously injured. There were even some who died. Zhuowen did not care whether Li Xinbing and the others lived or died. After all, he had nothing to do with Li Xinbing and the others. He naturally did not want to get involved in their affairs. His eyes were like torches as he scanned the battlefield, trying to find Ziling. Soon, he found Ziling tied up with a whip by a late-stage 5 elements transformation stage female cultivator. She was standing on top of a tall boulder, coldly looking down on the battlefield. Zhuowen's appearance naturally attracted everyone's attention. The short young man glanced at Zhuowen and found that he was only at the early stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. Li Xinbing and Minc, on the other hand, were pleasantly surprised. After a night, Zhuowen suddenly disappeared. They thought that he had gone out early in the morning. Then, this short young man brought people to snatch the headless statue in their temple. Thus, the 2 sides clashed and a great battle broke out. Li Xinbing and Minc, on the other hand, were secretly complaining. Although this short young man did not look like much, his strength was indeed very strong. He was actually at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage. They were completely at a disadvantage, and it would not be long before they were defeated by this person. Brother Dao Wen, can you lend us a hand? Xinbing will repay you generously after this, Li Xinbing said, asking for help from Zhuowen. The short young man looked coldly at Zhuowen and sneered. Li Xinbing, have you been beaten silly? You're actually asking for help from an early stage 5 elements transformation stage trash? No matter how many trash like him come, I'll kill them all. The short young man's voice was not soft. It resounded like thunder around the Great Rift Valley, and everyone heard it clearly. Chapter 3901. The short youth looked at the smile on Zhuowen's face, and for some reason, he felt a chill in his heart. It was as if a cold blade was pressed against his neck, causing his body to tremble involuntarily. How strange. How can a mere 5 elements transformation trash give me such a feeling? Is it just my imagination? The short youth felt that he had lost face after being frightened by Zhuowen. Now, Zhuowen had stopped again and questioned him. He felt that he had lost face and felt very uncomfortable. Trash, you have guts. How dare you talk back to me? An even more terrifying aura burst out from the short young man's body. Blazing golden light dissipated as he suddenly threw out 2 punches. Li Xinbing and Minc, who had been attacking the short youth, were shocked. They barely managed to block the short youth's terrifying punches, but with a groan, they spat out mouthfuls of blood and were forced to retreat. Trash, get over here and accept your death. The short youth hovered in mid-air, ignoring Minc and Li Xinbing who were pushed back by him. His cold gaze landed on Zhuowen. Li Xinbing and Minc had retreated quite a distance. When they saw that the short youth did not chase after them, they heaved a sigh of relief. The short youth was at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage, and his battle prowess was extremely strong. 1 against 2, he could completely suppress them. They were very clear that if they continued to fight, the 2 of them would undoubtedly lose within 100 rounds. And the result of defeat was death. When they saw that the short youth had started to target Zhuowen because of one sentence, they were ecstatic, but at the same time nervous. They knew that Zhuowen was very strong, stronger than both of them. However, the short youth was not weak either. He could suppress both of them without suffering any injuries. What they were worried about was whether Zhuowen was a match for this short youth. Zhuowen stood in place without moving. Instead, he stared coldly at the short youth. The killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. Initially, he did not want to meddle in other people's business. The battle between this short young man, Li Xinbing, and my Yuanxi had nothing to do with him. But this short youth actually dared to provoke him. That was simply courting death. Now, I'll give you a chance to live. Come in front of me, slap yourself 100 times, break one of your arms, kneel before me and kowtow to admit your mistakes. Then, I'll let bygones be bygones and spare your life. Zhuowen stood tall, his tone terrifyingly calm. However, within the calmness, there was an extremely terrifying chill. He had already given the short youth a chance to live. It all depended on whether he would grasp this one and only opportunity. The short young man was stunned at first, then he laughed out loud. He turned to his companion and said, "This trash is still an idiot, right? He actually said that he would give me a chance to live. Don't you think it's funny?" The short young man's companions roared with laughter, mocking Zhuowen for his arrogance and overconfidence. Li Xinbing, my Yuanxi, and the rest looked on coldly. The short young man and his companions might not know Zhuowen's strength, but they knew it all too well. However, they also felt that Zhuowen was a little too arrogant. Although they knew that Zhuowen was strong, he was not strong enough to make the short youth kneel and injure himself to beg for his life. In their eyes, Zhuowen and the short youth's strength should be about the same. Then you have no chance at all, Zhuowen said calmly. The short youth was extremely angry. This piece of trash, who was only at the initial stage of the 5 elements transformation stage, was obviously trash in cultivation. How dare he act so high and mighty? Who gave him the courage and confidence? He wanted to crush this piece of trash's arrogance and confidence. Die, you piece of trash! The short youth roared angrily. His entire body emitted a blazing divine light that was difficult to look at. He was like a high and mighty god descending from the heavens. Rumble. The short youth threw out a punch that was like a rising sun. It came from afar and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. The terrifying aura caused the expressions of everyone in the surroundings to change drastically. Li Xinbing and my Yuanxi's faces were especially pale. They could not help but smile bitterly. They could feel that the short youth's furious punch was too terrifying. It was much more terrifying than when he fought with the two of them. If the short youth had fought them with such strength from the beginning, they would have been defeated long ago. It was obvious that the short youth had not used his full strength. Brother Dao Wen might not necessarily be a match for him. Li Xinbing and my Yuanxi looked at each other and thought at the same time. Rumble. The short youth's punch was extremely fast. It landed on Zhuowen's face in the blink of an eye. The golden light emitted by the fist was too blazing. They only saw that after the golden light engulfed Zhuowen's figure, all they could see was gold. They couldn't see anything else or any other color. Senior brother Dao Wen. On a rock far behind, Ling, who was being held in the hand of a female cultivator, saw the blazing fist light engulf Zhuowen. Her pretty face turned pale and she could not help but cry out. "Haha, this is senior brother Nai's strongest abhijina, the divine fist of the great sun. He once killed a cultivator at the pinnacle of the 5 elements transformation stage with a single punch. Your lover's cultivation is too low. He has no chance of survival." Although the female cultivator was not very pretty, she had a curvaceous figure and was very hot. She held Ling in her hand and said proudly. Ling, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. She stood there motionless, as if she had been petrified. When the blazing fist radiance reached its peak, it actually turned into a huge sun that fell from the sky in the Great Rift Valley. It emitted rolling golden flames and flew wantonly. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent that was different from the sun burst forth from within the great sun. This sword intent was full of bravado and sharpness. It carried an unparalleled sharpness as it soared into the sky, covering the terrifying sun that was falling from the sky. Kacha. A mysterious purple color appeared within the sword intent. This purple color became more and more intense until it overshadowed the golden color of the great sun. Then, the purple energy turned into a sharp divine sword and pierced through the center of the great sun. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the great sun that seemed like it would never be extinguished crumbled inch by inch, shattering into countless golden rays. As for the mysterious purple sword, after piercing through the sun, it streaked across the sky and instantly shot towards the short youth. Under the horrified gaze of the short youth, it pierced through the center of his eyebrows. Then, without losing any momentum, it shot towards the distant horizon and turned into an imperceptible purple light spot. Thump! The short young man's expression completely froze. His body fell from mid-air in a sorry state, and a dull thud could be heard from his body. The crowd was silent. Everyone looked at the short youth's corpse in disbelief. He was a pinnacle 5 elements transformation stage cultivator, and he was able to suppress Li Xinbing and Miunc, 2 late-stage 5 elements transformation stage cultivators. However, at that moment, a strange purple light had pierced through his forehead and killed him before their very eyes. Chapter 3902. I'm not a ruthless person. This person insulted me, but I don't intend to kill him. I also gave him a chance, but unfortunately, he didn't know how to cherish it. Zhuo Wen spoke slowly. His words resounded in everyone's ears like a sudden clap of thunder. Everyone laughed bitterly in their hearts, thinking that Zhuo Wen's words were no different from not saying anything. His request was too humiliating, and the short youth was also a young master. He was proud and arrogant, so naturally, it was impossible for him to compromise. The female cultivator holding Ziling was still talking, but when she saw the body of the short youth on the ground, her voice came to an abrupt end, and her jaw almost fell to the ground. Ziling, who was originally in a daze, suddenly became lively, and her eyes were filled with excitement. Brother Dao Wen won, haha, he won. Ziling almost shouted in joy, and the joy on her pretty face could not be concealed. Sister, Ziling is my companion. How long do you plan to hold her hostage? Zhuo Wen's eyes fell on the female cultivator standing on the rock, and a bright smile appeared on his lips. But in the eyes of the female cultivator, this smile was like the smile of a demon, and she could not help but scream. Then, she grabbed Ziling's neck and said coldly, "Don't come over. If you dare come over, I'll turn this bitch into a corpse immediately." Zhuowen frowned slightly and said lightly, "Let go of Sister Ziling, and I won't make things difficult for you. I'll let you and your companions leave here." The dozen or so people brought by the short youth all retreated behind the female cultivator and looked at Zhuowen with fear in their eyes. The female cultivator recovered and saw that Zhuowen cared so much about Ziling. Her eyes were full of resentment. "Hand over the headless idol of your temple, and then kill yourself in front of me. Maybe I'll let this bitch go." Unfortunately, as soon as the female cultivator spoke, she found that Zhuowen's figure had disappeared before her eyes like a ghost. By the time she regained her senses, Zhuowen had already passed by her, and his sword finger had already pressed against her glabella. A dense and powerful purple energy burst out from the sword finger and penetrated deep into her soul. It exploded with a terrifying sword intent and shattered her soul. "Don't push your luck. There's a limit to my patience, and I won't be kind every time." Zhuowen's indifferent voice sounded in the female cultivator's ears. The female cultivator's eyes were filled with regret. Then, she fell to the ground and lost all signs of life. "Junior Ziling, are you all right?" Zhuowen grabbed Ziling's waist and used his divine power to break the barrier around her body. He asked with concern. Ziling was still in shock. At this moment, when Zhuowen asked her, she realized that their posture was slightly ambiguous. She quickly stood up and quietly distanced herself from Zhuowen. With her heart beating wildly, she said, "Senior brother Dao Wen, I'm fine. Thank you for saving me this time. We're companions. I said that I'd take you through this entrance trial smoothly. Of course, I won't go back on my word." Zhuowen smiled. Ziling looked at Zhuowen's smile in a daze. At first, she didn't care about Zhuowen's big words. However, after these few battles, she deeply realized that Zhuowen indeed had the strength and confidence to do so. He really did have the strength to help her through this trial. When the short young man and the female cultivator died, their companions all turned pale and began to quietly retreat in fear. "Did I say you could go?" Zhuowen suddenly shouted. These cultivators immediately knelt down and begged Zhuowen for mercy. "Don't worry, I'm not a bloodthirsty person. As long as you do me a favor, I'll let you go immediately," Zhuowen said calmly. The rest of the people naturally nodded. After beating around the bush, Zhuowen also learned the specific location of the temple they occupied from this group of people. However, when they left the temple and attacked Zhuowen's temple, they had already put away the headless idols in the temple. They stayed in the temple for a night and also saw that the temple's light source was provided by the headless idols. If they wanted to survive in this small world for a month, they had to fight for as many headless idols as possible to strengthen their light source so that they could survive in the increasingly terrifying darkness. Zhuowen finally found out that the headless idols were hidden on the female cultivator's body. He couldn't help but be surprised. He thought that the idols would be kept by the short young man, but it seemed that he was wrong. He took off the female cultivator's spiritual ring and found a headless idols inside. He nodded and let the rest of the cultivators leave. "Senior brother Dao Wen, you can't let these people go just like that. After they leave, they will definitely join other factions and survive in this small world. This is like letting a tiger return to the mountain and strengthen the other factions." Li Xinbing and Mai Yuanxi quickly came up and persuaded Zhuowen to kill the rest of the cultivators. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Even if they join other factions, they won't be a threat to me. Why should I waste my energy to kill them?" Li Xinbing and Mai Yuanxi were helpless. They knew that it would be useless to persuade Zhuowen, so they tactfully kept silent. Zhuowen took out the headless idols he took from the female cultivator and placed them in the temple. He remembered Pei Shanglong's words. The more nights he stayed here, the more terrifying the darkness would be. Tonight would be the second night. He wanted to see how much more terrifying the darkness would be compared to the first night. At the same time, he saw through the jade slip that nearly 30 of the 108 light spots on the jade slip had disappeared. This meant that 30 of the headless idols in the temples had been taken away. Zhuowen shook his head. It was only the second day, and the competition was already so intense. He suspected that the 10 temples would be decided in 10 days, not 30 days. Moreover, there might be some sinister experts who would collect even more headless idols, leaving no chance for the cultivators in the other temples. Nominally, only 10 headless idols were needed to pass 30 days. However, in reality, the number of temples that would survive would be less than 10. Zhuowen returned to the hall and silently sat cross-legged before he started to meditate and cultivate. Although the darkness in this small world was terrifying, the chaotic energy was much denser than the outside world. It was a holy land for cultivation. After Li Xinbing and Mai Yuanxi returned to the temple, they intentionally or unintentionally tried to get closer to Ziling. Chapter 3903. As night fell, the darkness sank into the earth. Li Xinbing and Mai Yuanxi both heaved a sigh of relief. They were worried that other cultivators would come to snatch the headless statue from them. However, after waiting for an entire day in fear, no other cultivators came to the Great Rift Valley where their temple was located. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The darkness sank into the earth, and a strange black wind blew around them. Amidst the whistling of the wind, there were also some ear-piercing screeches. These sharp sounds were the ear-piercing sounds of demonic charm rampage. Zhuowen opened his eyes. Vast amounts of Hongmeng divine power condensed in his eyes, making them as hot as the sun. When his gaze fell on the darkness, his gaze became rather serious. He could see that there were more evil spirits in the darkness around the palace than last night. It seemed that Pei Shanglong's words were true. The darkness in this small world was indeed getting more terrifying by the day. From Zhuowen's point of view, the darkness today was indeed stronger than last night, but not by much. Even if it was a headless statue, it was still very safe hiding in the temple. Of course, judging from the trend of the increase day by day, the surrounding power of darkness would probably become even more terrifying after 5 or 6 days. Just the headless statue alone might not be able to resist the invasion of the darkness at that time. Suddenly, Zhuowen stood up and took down a headless statue beside him. When everyone saw Zhuowen's action, they all stood up and looked at Zhuowen nervously. They didn't know what Zhuowen wanted to do with the statue. Senior brother Dao Wen, you? Ziling asked doubtfully. I plan to enter the darkness to take a look, Zhuowen said calmly. What? Everyone was shocked. They felt that Zhuowen was overestimating his strength. They knew how terrifying the darkness was. Even if they knew that Zhuowen was strong enough, they didn't think that Zhuowen could return safely from the darkness. Junior sister Ziling, don't worry. I'm taking a headless statue. With the headless statue as a light source, the things in the darkness can't do anything to me. Zhuowen smiled and comforted Ziling with a few words, then left the hall. Li Xinbing and my UNC opened their mouths but didn't say anything. This headless statue was originally stolen by Zhuowen. It didn't belong to them. They had nothing to say about Zhuowen taking it away. They weren't worried about Zhuowen's life, but that if Zhuowen died in the darkness, the headless statue would be lost. This was a huge loss for them. After watching Zhuowen leave, Ziling worriedly said in a low voice, Senior brother Dao Wen should be fine. Zhuowen carried the headless stone statue and quickly rushed into the darkness. Oh. The moment he entered the darkness, countless evil spirits pounced on him like crazy. However, Zhuowen immediately took out the headless idol. Blazing rays of light shot out like a blazing sun. The evil spirits that were originally rushing over were burned by the light and sizzled. One after another, they retreated back into the darkness, not daring to come within 1 li of Zhuowen. Of course, some of the weaker evil spirits were directly disintegrated under the light of the headless statue. After a while, Zhuowen passed through the Rift Valley and arrived at the entrance. He looked at the Rift Valley and could vaguely see the hazy light emitted by the temple in the depths of the Rift Valley. After Zhuowen looked away, he jumped up and left the Rift Valley. He ran for another few hundred miles and came to the bottom of a cliff. The reason why he carried the statue out was not to explore the darkness, but to cultivate the universal scripture of heaven and earth. Originally, he could survive in the darkness without relying on the statue. However, he did not dare to enter the darkness without relying on the statue. This was too shocking for Li Xinbing and the others. There was a high chance that the universal scripture of heaven and earth on him would be exposed. Of course, the darkness in this small world was more terrifying than the outside world. If Zhuowen did not rely on the headless statue, he would still be in trouble if he encountered an evil spirit. It would be much safer to bring the headless idol along. Oh. Under the cliff, evil spirits were everywhere, running rampant. Zhuowen carried the statue and walked to the bottom of the cliff. The surrounding evil spirits let out mournful shrieks as they all fled. Boom! Zhuowen placed the statue on the open space under the cliff. Suddenly, there was a dull thud from the ground, and the ground seemed to shake several times. The headless statue did not look very tall, but it was extremely heavy. Even with Zhuowen's strength, he was still a little out of breath after running for so long while carrying the headless statue. Zhuowen sat cross-legged under the statue. After adjusting his breath for a while, he stood up again. His eyes were like torches, shooting out bright divine light as he looked into the darkness. Most of the evil spirits around him were of the fighting level. He was not a discoverer level evil spirit. This evil spirit was much stronger than the fighting level evil spirits. Naturally, there were fewer of them. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He had never tried to fight a fighting level evil spirit alone. In fact, he did not have a clear idea of how strong a fighting level evil spirit was. However, from Prodo's performance, he could see that a peak fighting level evil spirit should be around the early stage of the god realm. Although there were many fighting level evil spirits in the darkness, there were not many peak fighting level evil spirits. Moreover, Zhuowen's own nature energy was very good at restraining evil spirits. Although the fighting level evil spirits were strong, they were still restrained by the nature energy in his body. Thinking of this, Zhuowen slowly walked to the edge of the light source. His eyes fell on the evil spirit closest to him. This evil spirit had been wandering around the edge of the light source. Its eyes were greedily staring at Zhuowen. Now, when it saw the human in front of it walk directly to it, it became extremely irritable. Its blood-red eyes looked coldly at Zhuowen. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as if it was going to swallow Zhuowen at any time. However, it was still afraid of the light source and did not dare to enter it. Zhuowen grinned. Suddenly, his right hand turned into a claw. He reached into the darkness and grabbed the evil spirit's neck. This evil spirit obviously did not expect that this lowly human could see its specific position in the darkness. It was absent-minded for a moment and forgot to break free from Zhuowen's right hand. It was this moment of absent-mindedness that allowed Zhuowen to pull the evil spirit into the light source with his right hand. Sizzle. Sizzle. Suddenly, the evil spirit's body emitted terrifying green smoke. Its body gradually became transparent. The evil spirit struggled violently. Chapter 3904. Looks like I made the right choice in bringing the statue. With such a wonderful effect, it can save me a lot of energy to refine the evil spirit. Zhuowen muttered to himself, and his eyes shone with excitement. The effect of the battle-grade evil spirits was indeed not bad. After refining them, he could clearly feel that the god force in his body had increased by a lot. According to his estimation, if he refined another dozen or so battle-grade evil spirits, he would be able to smoothly break through to the 5 elements transformation mid-stage. Zhuowen's spirit rose, and he came to another place at the edge of the light source. Then, he grabbed another evil spirit that was pacing back and forth at the edge of the light source, and dragged it into the light source. This evil spirit was like a live fish caught by a fisherman, screaming and struggling non-stop. With his first experience, Zhuowen could be said to be an experienced veteran. He firmly grabbed the evil spirit's neck, and did not let go. Moreover, the god force in his body poured out. In a short while, the second evil spirit was completely refined by him. Next, Zhuowen followed the same pattern, and soon, he refined 5 more evil spirits. Just as Zhuowen was about to grab the next evil spirit, he discovered that there were no more evil spirits around the light source. He saw that several hundred meters away from the edge of the light source, there were evil spirits staring at Zhuowen with vigilance. Zhuowen could see the fear and alarm in these evil spirits' eyes. How could a mere human be so terrifying as to eat their companions? Was he still human? After all, these evil spirits were battle-grade evil spirits, and their intelligence was already very high. They naturally saw through the trick, and knew that this hateful human was tempting them. They were not idiots, and naturally, they would not fall for it again. Zhuowen shook his head helplessly. He also knew that this kind of trick would not work every time. Thus, he took a step out of the light source's range, and stepped into the darkness. When the evil spirits that were hiding in the distance saw that Zhuowen actually dared to step into the darkness, their bright eyes emitted a light that could not be ignored. Then, these evil spirits let out terrifying roars and rushed over. In an instant, they rushed in front of Zhuowen, and a fishy smell filled the air. Zhuowen sneered as boundless grand mist god force surged out from his body like an ocean. Then, his feet moved in a mysterious way, like a fish swimming in the water, flickering in the surroundings. After dodging the first wave of attacks from these evil spirits, he moved like lightning. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed the evil spirit closest to him. The evil spirit struggled like a fish in water, but Zhuowen's gaze was cold. Vast grand mist god force poured out from his palm, turning into purple-gold flames that swiftly refined the evil spirit in his hand. The evil spirit did not last for long. With a miserable cry, it completely turned into a strand of violet gold energy that surged into Zhuowen's body, becoming a part of Zhuowen. Zhuowen's movement technique was infused with the power of the Grand Word Stone. It was already much faster than cultivators of the same level. Coupled with the strange and tricky movement technique, even a peak yin-yang transformation cultivator might not necessarily be faster than him. Zhuoan turned into a strange purple-colored phantom as he shuttled through the evil spirits. Every time there was a purple flash, Zhuoan would ruthlessly grab an evil spirit in the palm of his hand. He would swallow and spit out powerful god force, completely refining the evil spirit. As the number of evil spirits he refined increased, Zhuozheng's aura became more and more powerful, and his refining speed also became faster and faster. After Zhuowen refined the 15th evil spirit, he felt his entire body warm up. A vast and surging energy filled his limbs and bones, breaking through all the meridians in his body and rushing straight to his Tianling acupoint. Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he suppressed the excitement in his heart. He knew that he had accumulated enough energy and could break through immediately. Roar, roar, roar. In the darkness, when the evil spirits saw that Zhuowen's figure was as fast as a ghost, they learned to be smart. They no longer split up and rushed out. Instead, they surrounded Zhuowen in a circular formation. This hateful human seemed to be able to restrain them. Therefore, they did not dare to fight alone and decided to cooperate to take down this human. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He clenched his right fist and punched out dozens of times. Every punch was filled with terrifying fist force. The vast grand mist god force turned into a sky full of fist shadows that swept out in all directions. The evil spirit's encirclement was instantly broken by the terrifying fist shadows. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity to rush through one of the gaps and leave the evil spirit's encirclement. He did not dare to stay in the encirclement for too long. After all, each of these evil spirits was at the battle realm. Their strength was monstrous and definitely not ordinary. If he stayed in the encirclement for too long, he was afraid that his life would be in danger. Zhuowen leaped a few times and rushed toward the headless statue's light source. However, when Zhuowen was about to enter the light source's range, his eyelids twitched. An extremely ominous feeling rose in his heart. Then, he suddenly changed his direction. With a twist of his waist, he rushed in a circle and rushed into the light source. The moment Zhuowen rushed into the light source, a huge palm that was several feet long swept out from the cliff and fiercely slammed into the path that Zhuowen originally took. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In an instant, countless cracks appeared on the ground at the edge of the light source. Violent tremors spread out in all directions. The surrounding earth quaked and the mountains swayed. It was very shocking. Zhuowen stared fixedly at the palm, and the hair on his body stood on end. His gaze followed the palm and fell on the cliff. He saw a pair of scarlet eyes light up in the cliff, like a pair of huge blood-red lanterns. This pair of blood-red eyes slowly looked down at Zhuowen coldly and said indifferently, "What a cunning human. You actually dodged my attack." This evil spirit was dozens of feet tall, and its whole body was covered with hard rock-like scales. These scales were almost exactly the same as the rocks on the cliff. It stuck to the cliff as if it was one with the cliff. Zhuowen did not see from the beginning that there was actually an evil spirit hiding on the cliff. Moreover, this evil spirit's aura was extremely vast and terrifying. It was far beyond the battle realm evil spirit. It was probably another battle realm evil spirit. Just now, this evil spirit had been hiding in the cliff. The moment Zhuowen returned to the light source was when it was the most relaxed, and it brazenly attacked. If it were not for Zhuowen's divine sense that was far superior to that of ordinary cultivators, he might have been hit by the palm. Even if he did not die, he would have been seriously injured. The evil spirit on the cliff coldly looked down at Zhuowen and did not continue to attack. Zhuowen knew that although the battle realm evil spirit was powerful, it was still afraid of the light source emitted by the headless statue. After he had no more worries, he no longer paid attention to this evil spirit. Instead, he sat cross-legged next to the statue and began to prepare to break through to the middle stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. In the middle of the night, the aura in Zhuowen's body suddenly turned into a pillar of qi that soared into the sky. And in his body, there were strange banging sounds, as if there was an oven that was constantly burning. The surrounding temperature also rose to an extremely terrifying level because of this. And behind Zhuowen, the power of the 5 elements surged out and formed a strange cycle in the void behind him. Chapter 3905. The five-element ring behind Zhuowen began to spin faster and faster. As it spun, the volume of the five-element ring actually doubled in size. On the surface of the five-element ring, there were 5 different colors, mixed with purple and gold. The light was overflowing, as if it was going to break through the darkness. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes, and the five-element ring behind him suddenly dissipated. He slowly stood up, and his eyes revealed a look of surprise. I finally broke through to the middle stage of the 5 elements transformation stage, Zhuowen muttered to himself. He could feel that after the breakthrough, his strength had increased by quite a bit. Zhuowen slowly raised his head and looked at the cliff behind him. There was a pair of blood-red eyes there. Zhuowen's gaze burned with a towering will to fight. The owner of the blood-red eyes also noticed the battle intent in Zhuowen's eyes. It slowly narrowed its eyes and said with a little anger, "Puny human, you have guts, how dare you look at me with such eyes? In your eyes, we cultivators are your food. But in my eyes, you all are my food." Zhuowen grinned and said, "Boom boom boom." The evil spirit in the cliff let out an angry howl, and its huge body suddenly rushed out of the cliff. The cliff shattered into countless pieces, falling from above, and hitting the ground with a dull sound. Many of the double-level evil spirits around the cliff let out sharp screams and immediately fled far away. They trembled as they looked at the enormous evil spirit that came out of the cliff. Zhuowen silently looked at the evil spirit, and only then did he see the specific appearance of this evil spirit. This evil spirit's appearance was like a rock, with protruding pieces, and it was dozens of feet tall. Its eyes were incomparably scarlet, and at first glance, it looked like a stone giant. Zhuowen's expression was extremely solemn. This evil spirit's aura was extremely vast, and it was not weaker than the pig-head evil spirit last night. If Zhuowen had not cultivated the universal scripture of heaven and earth, he would not have dared to challenge this evil spirit. The fighting-level evil spirit was no longer a threat to him, so he planned to challenge the fighting-level evil spirit to verify the extent of his current strength. "Puny human, get out of the light source and die." The stone giant looked at the headless statue with fear, and did not dare to get too close. He roared at Zhuowen. "Just what I want." Zhuowen smiled. The moment he smiled, he took a step forward, and the surging power of the 5 elements surged out of his body like a vast ocean, pouring out in torrents. The surging power of the 5 elements condensed in the void behind him, and it turned into a huge 5-element ring. The 5-element ring spun rapidly, bursting with colorful light that spread out in all directions. A terrifying aura spread out along with the light like a vast ocean. After feeling the terrifying aura, the stone giant's eyes could not help but focus. He said in a low voice, "Your aura. It's not the aura of a normal practitioner, and it's mixed with an aura that I hate very much. Are you from the exorcist family?" Speaking of this, the stone giant's voice was a little unsteady. He obviously did not like people from the exorcist family. Zhuowen sneered, and did not intend to answer the stone giant's words. He bounced his legs, and like an arrow, he rushed toward the stone giant. "Humph. Exorcist family? So what? I'll kill one if one comes, and 2 if 2 come, I'll kill a pair." The stone giant's voice was as loud as a bell, and it suddenly spread out. Then, he raised his fist, which was as thick as a small hill, and smashed it toward Zhuowen. Whoosh! Whoosh! The violent sound of the wind continued to resound. The surrounding air seemed to be torn into countless pieces. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Zhuowen was not afraid. He grabbed the huge 5-element wheel behind him, and fiercely swung it. Boom! The huge fist force and the 5-element wheel collided, and terrifying energy ripples burst out. These energy ripples were like countless fireworks, bursting and spreading in all directions. In the deep darkness, it was so gorgeous and colorful. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan as he flew backwards and smashed into a cliff behind him. The stone giant, on the other hand, kept retreating, and his body was extremely unstable. Zhuowen came out of the gap between the rocks, and laughed with bright eyes. "I thought you were very powerful, but it turns out that you're just SOSO. Zhuowen was quite excited. He jumped up and attacked the stone giant. The 5-element ring had become his weapon, and he kept swinging it and smashing it down. The momentum was terrifying, and the power was monstrous. In his divine power, there was a strong power of the awe-inspiring righteousness, which was a natural restraint against evil spirits. Zhuowen's cultivation was not strong, but relying on the power of the awe-inspiring righteousness, an evil spirit at the cultivator level might not be able to kill him. Bang! 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 Zhuowen was beaten back again and again by the stone giant, and he was almost covered with cuts and bruises. However, Zhuowen did not shrink back because of this. Instead, he became more and more courageous as he fought. Under Zhuowen's constant attacks, the stone giant was beaten back again and again, and some fine cracks appeared on the surface of its solid stone body. This puny human. The stone giant looked at Zhuowen, who was like a cockroach that could not be killed, and his eyes were filled with shock and anger. This puny human's cultivation was obviously pathetically weak, but he could not kill him in one go. He also knew that this had something to do with the awe-inspiring righteousness in Zhuowen's body. This energy restrained him too much, so he did not dare to use his full strength to deal with this puny human. Boom! The stone giant suddenly threw a punch, and he was shocked to find that the slippery human in front of him did not dodge, and his abdomen was hit by his punch. Fart! Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was extremely pale, but he grinned at the stone giant. "Your arm is mine." Before the stone giant could react, a blazing purple-gold light gushed out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. From within the purple-gold light, purple-gold divine swords flew out. These purple-gold divine swords condensed into a giant sword that was dozens of feet long. The sword turned and slashed at the stone giant's right hand. Clang! 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 Countless sparks appeared, and the stone giant's right arm did not last long before it was cut off at the shoulder. The huge arm fell from mid-air and heavily smashed to the ground, causing the ground to tremble several times. After Zhuowen cut off the rock giant's right arm, he quickly put the arm into his great world. Then, without thinking, he fled into the headless idol's light source. When the stone giant came to his senses, his right arm was already cut off, and Zhuowen had already retreated to the headless idol's side. Despicable human, you! The stone giant was furious, and he let out an earth-shattering roar. He rushed toward Zhuowen, who was in the headless idol, as if he had lost his mind. This puny human had cut off his arm, and this was the humiliation of his life. However, when he stepped into the light source, his body began to emit a sizzling sound, and the surface of his body began to vaporize, as if he would be annihilated at any time by the light source. Chapter 3906. He had just taken the rock giant's punch, and his injuries had become extremely serious. He even felt that his internal organs were somewhat ruptured. In his current state, it was really difficult for him to withstand the rock giant's attack. However, when the rock giant was about to reach the headless idol, it quickly retreated and left the range of the light source in an instant. Despicable human, I will remember you. Don't let me see you in the future, or I will kill you. The rock giant flew away quickly, and its furious voice came from afar. Zhuowen sighed lightly. He slowly sat cross-legged next to the headless idol and began to meditate and recuperate. At the same time, he began to silently refine the arm of the rock giant that he had personally chopped off. After Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the middle stage of the 5 elements transformation, he knew that refining a warrior-level evil spirit would not improve his cultivation so much. Unless it was a peak warrior-level evil spirit, there would still be some benefits to his cultivation. Therefore, he placed his attention on the rock giant. At the same time, he also wanted to verify the extent of his current strength. After another 2 hours, Zhuowen found that the surrounding darkness was gradually thinning. He knew that the night was about to fade away. His injuries were slightly better, but now he looked quite miserable. His body was covered in blood, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His chest was especially obvious. This was the wound caused by the rock giant's punch. It was extremely terrifying. Even if Zhuowen's self-healing ability was very strong, the wound on his chest was not something that could be healed in a short period of time. As expected of a warrior-level evil spirit. I only refined an arm and it gave me such a surge of energy. Zhuowen stood up. Although his external injuries looked quite terrible, in fact, his injuries were not as serious as they appeared. Furthermore, his cultivation had also improved. What a pity. If I could refine a warrior-level evil spirit, maybe I could break through again and reach the late stage of the 5 elements transformation. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He could not forget the rock giant from last night. He picked up the headless idol again and returned to the temple in the Great Rift Valley. When he returned to the temple, everyone in the temple was shocked. Zhuowen's body was covered in blood, and he looked extremely miserable. It was obvious that he was severely injured. Senior brother Dao Wen, what happened to you? Ziling's beautiful eyes were filled with shock as she hurried forward to ask. Li Xinbing and Miunc were also shocked. Zhuowen's performance had exceeded their expectations. His strength was extremely strong. They did not expect Zhuowen to be in such a sorry state while carrying the headless idol. Zhuowen smiled faintly and casually found an excuse to explain the injuries on his body. No one doubted him. Miunc, this is our chance. Lin Xinbing's beautiful eyes flickered. She was truly moved by Miunc's suggestion. Zhuowen was indeed powerful, and it would be beneficial for them to have him as their leader. More importantly, they had approached Zhuowen many times to ask him to join forces, but Zhuowen's attitude had always been non-committal. He even ignored them. This made them uncertain about Zhuowen's attitude. Therefore, they did not know when Zhuowen would abandon them. Because of this, the two of them were very wary of Zhuowen. If they were strong enough, they would have killed Zhuowen a long time ago. However, Zhuowen was too strong, and they did not dare to make a move. Now, Zhuowen was severely injured, and his strength was definitely declining. This was the best time for them to make a move. Li Xinbing looked at Ziling, who was sitting beside Zhuowen. She frowned and shook her head. Senior Mai, if Senior Dao Wen really wanted to abandon us, he would have chased us out of the temple yesterday. But he didn't do that. Instead, he went his own way. I think he just wants to occupy a spot in the palace. As long as we don't provoke him, he will continue to guard this palace. You know, there are many cultivators stronger than us in this trial. Now that Senior Dao Wen is stronger than us, and he did not attack us, he might be our only hope to pass this trial. Miunc fell into deep thought. He stared at Zhuowen's back, hesitated for a while, and finally gave up. Li Xinbing was right. Now was not the time for internal strife. They should be in the same boat. So what if they killed Zhuowen? Their strength was simply too weak. If they wanted to pass this trial smoothly, it would still be somewhat difficult. But if they followed Zhuowen, there might be a glimmer of hope. Sitting upright on the praying mat, the corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a smile. Li Xinbing and Miunc had used their consciousness to communicate, and he did not hear the contents of their conversation. However, he could clearly feel the killing intent released by the two of them. He was waiting. If the two of them made a move against him, he would immediately counterattack and kill both Li Xinbing and Miunc. Fortunately, the two of them retracted their killing intent after transmitting their voices. He knew that the two of them had retreated. Of course, to Zhuowen, it was a wise decision for them to retreat. Although he was injured internally, his strength was not affected by much. If these two people really joined hands to attack him, he could kill them with a single slap. For the next 5 days, no other cultivators came to Zhuowen's hall in the Great Rift Valley. Zhuowen did not intend to go to the other temples to steal their headless idols. Every night, he carried the headless idols and rushed into the darkness, frantically refining the evil spirits in the darkness. Ziling, Li Xinbing, and the others were already used to him carrying the headless idols into the darkness. Their main concern was that as the days passed, the darkness became more and more terrifying. There were only 2 headless idols in their temple. And every night, Zhuowen would take away one of the idols. They could feel that the evil spirits in the darkness could break through the light source and start to come into contact with the temple. On the 7th night, a demonic hand swept over and slammed into the temple. The top of the temple was knocked off, and many stones fell from the temple. Chapter 3907. In the dark night, countless evil spirits were running amok, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. Zhuo Wen carried the headless idol and returned to the cliff where he had been 5 days ago. Bastard human, how dare you come here? Suddenly, a pair of scarlet eyes lit up on the cliff. This pair of scarlet eyes stared coldly at Zhuo Wen, who was carrying the headless deity statue, not far away from the cliff. Zhuo Wen raised his head and looked at the rock giant hiding in the cliff. He grinned and said, "I've reached a bottleneck in my cultivation, and I urgently need the energy of a warrior-level evil spirit to break through. I've thought about it, and I don't seem to know any other warrior-level evil spirits in this strange world. You're the only one I'm familiar with. So, I've come to find you." Roar. The rock giant was enraged. He let out a furious roar, and his voice spread out for thousands of miles around the cliff. "This human is too hateful. He actually treats me as prey. I'm so angry." Zhuo Wen stood next to the headless idol with a smile and continued, "Friend, if you're really angry, don't suppress your emotions. Come here, I'm standing right here. You can hit me as much as you want. I won't fight back." The rock giant roared again and again, but soon calmed down. He looked at the headless idol next to Zhuo Wen with fear. "This human is very cunning. He actually used my anger to lure me to the headless idol. Last time, when I lost my arm, I was so angry that I lost my mind. I suffered a loss from the headless idol. I won't suffer the same loss twice. Trash human, what else can you do besides relying on the headless idol? Do you dare to face me directly?" The rock giant provoked. "Haha, why wouldn't I dare?" Zhuo Wen sneered and put down the headless idol. Then, he walked step by step to the cliff. After a while, he walked to the edge of the light source and looked up at the rock giant mockingly. The rock giant's scarlet eyes unconsciously shrank. He looked down at Zhuo Wen and still didn't move. The human in front of him was too cunning. He didn't have the confidence to make him stay, so he still didn't attack. "If you're so capable, why don't you just come to the cliff and stand in the light source? You're still afraid. What's the point?" The rock giant sneered. The rock giant thought that Zhuo Wen would refuse, but he didn't expect Zhuo Wen to agree without even thinking. Then, he walked out of the light source and slowly walked to the bottom of the cliff. Zhuo Wen's figure completely appeared in the darkness. Because the rock giant had released his aura, many of the evil spirits in the surroundings had already fled. Therefore, the surroundings of the cliff were much quieter and more spacious. When Zhuo Wen stopped and stood at the edge of the cliff, the rock giant let out a wild laugh. Then, he suddenly walked out of the cliff. A huge palm, like a small mountain, fell in front of Zhuo Wen. "Ha ha, foolish human. You actually dare to come before me. Today, I will completely destroy you, you scum." The rock giant laughed heartily, his scarlet eyes filled with rage and pleasure. In his eyes, this palm strike was sufficient to completely crush Zhuo Wen into powder, and it was sufficient to make him die beyond death. Zhuo Wen sneered. He took a step forward, and his eyes were as calm as water. He also punched out. Terrifying fist force burst out with blazing grand mist divine power. Purple gold energy, like a blazing sun, soared into the sky and slammed into the rock giant's huge palm. Then, the rock giant was shocked to find that his palm force was broken. The terrifying fist intent forced him back a few steps, and he leaned against the cliff. Countless rocks fell from the cliff. "Old friend, let me borrow your left arm." The rock giant leaned against the cliff. Before he could react, purple gold light burst out from Zhuo Wen's body like a god. Like a ghost, he appeared near the rock giant's left arm and grabbed it with both hands. The rock giant roared and swung his left arm with all his might. However, he was shocked to find that Zhuo Wen's hands were like a tight band. He firmly held his left arm, and the rock giant was unable to move. Then, the rock giant was horrified to find that streaks of purple gold sword intent surged out from between Zhuo Wen's eyebrows. He remembered that night 5 days ago. This despicable human had also used this move to cut off his right arm. F***ck. Let go of me, you bastard. The rock giant was so scared that his heart was trembling. He quickly swung his left arm, trying to get rid of Zhuo Wen. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was like a sticky candy, clinging to the rock giant's left arm. Terrifying energy exploded from his tiny body, causing the rock giant's movements to be extremely stiff. He was almost frozen on the spot, unable to move at all. This despicable human is stronger than last time. The rock giant was shocked and angry at the same time. A chill rose in his heart, especially when he saw the purple-gold light between Zhuowen's eyebrows become more and more intense. He was so horrified that he almost screamed out loud. "Old friend, I've said that your left arm is mine. You'd better stop struggling." Zhuowen sneered. Streaks of soul sword intent burst out and condensed into a huge, terrifying purple-gold sword in the air. Then, it slashed down from the sky. Crack! The rock giant's left arm was cleanly cut off. The huge rock arm fell to the ground like a small mountain, causing the ground to tremble a few times. Zhuowen landed on the ground and neatly put his left arm into the macro world. Then, he quickly escaped into the light source. However, after running a few steps, he found that the rock giant was not fooled and was chasing after him. He immediately looked back in surprise. Then, he saw that the rock giant looked like he wanted to cry but had no tears. Then, he ran away. However, the silly big guy was not running toward him. Instead, he was running in the opposite direction. His speed was so fast that Zhuowen was almost speechless. Hey, old friend, don't run so fast. Your left arm is not enough. I still need your legs," Zhuowen shouted as he nimbly carried the headless idol on his shoulder. Then, he started running in the direction where the rock giant had fled. This was a genuine elder-level evil spirit. Zhuowen would not let it go so easily. He believed that as long as he refined the entire rock giant, his cultivation would be greatly improved. "Oh my God! This horrible human is chasing after me. What should I do? Mom, Dad, where are you?" The rock giant was scared out of his wits. Seeing that Zhuowen was chasing after him, he almost cried for his mom and dad. His legs, which were still intact, were running at the fastest speed he had ever run in his life. If he did not run faster, his legs would be cut off by this cruel human. He was completely afraid of this abominable human. Chapter 3908. Old friend, you're tall and strong, but your movements are quite nimble. Your legs are also very fast. They're indeed a pair of good legs. Just as the rock giant was still in a daze, a teasing voice sounded in his ears. Then, he saw Zhuowen's tiny figure appear on his shoulder without him noticing. Moreover, this guy was carrying the headless idol in his hand. The blazing light shone on his body, causing thick green smoke to rise from his body. Under the influence of the light source, he suddenly felt a sense of weakness in his body, and his speed also slowed down a little. Then, a sword light flashed in front of his eyes. Then, he lost all feeling in his legs and his body sank quickly. Plop! He immediately fell flat on his face. His cheeks hit the ground and his buttocks stuck up high. Then, he saw the human jump down from his shoulder and walk behind him. His eyes widened in anger as he saw that the human was sizing up his severed legs not far away from him. "You pervert!" The rock giant wanted to cry but had no tears. He even wanted to die. He was a warrior-level evil spirit, but his limbs were severed by this despicable human. He couldn't even get up. This was definitely the most humiliating moment of his life. After Zhuowen retracted his huge legs, he slowly walked up to the rock giant. "Old friend, do you want to die?" Above Zhuowen's head floated a purple-gold sword that was several 100 feet long. He stood in the air and looked down at the stone giant before him, revealing an innocent smile. The rock giant trembled and shook his head like a rattledrum. What a joke! He had cultivated step by step for countless years to reach the warrior level. His cultivation in this life was extremely high. How could he want to die like this? Zhuowen's smile became even more brilliant. Seeing Zhuowen's brilliant smile, the rock giant trembled and felt that something was wrong. He had an extremely bad feeling. "I don't want to die." Although the rock giant felt uneasy, he still spoke his mind honestly. Zhuowen's smile became even more brilliant. He said, "It's good that you don't want to die. How about this? You can be considered a tyrant in this area. If you can summon a large number of evil spirits for me, I can spare your life. The rock giant said in a low muffled voice, I'm only a warrior level evil spirit. I can only summon evil spirits below the warrior level. You. Zhuowen smiled and said, it's fine, just summon as many as you want. Oh right, I'm quite picky. You can summon peak warrior level evil spirits. The rock giant looked fearfully at the purple gold sword floating above Zhuowen's head. He swallowed his saliva and nodded obediently, and agreed to follow Zhuowen's request. Seeing the rock giant agree, Zhuowen's smile became even more amiable. Then, he sat cross-legged beside the headless idol and took out the left arm and a pair of legs of the rock giant. In front of the rock giant, boundless grand mist god force rushed out from his body and started refining the rock giant's body. The rock giant looked at his 4 limbs being refined by Zhuowen into pure energy and turned into Zhuowen's own energy. The rock giant's eyelids twitched and his heart was filled with sorrow. In any case, he was still a cultivator-level evil spirit. In the dark world of this small world, he could be considered an overlord. However, his limbs had been chopped off by a mere human and refined. Moreover, it had been done right under his nose. Among the countless warrior-level evil spirits, he was the only one. Half an hour later, Zhuowen completely refined the rock giant's left arm and legs. The energy in his body was abundant, but he was still a little short of a breakthrough. Zhuowen looked greedily at the rock giant. He licked his lips and asked, peak warrior-level evil spirits, you still haven't summoned them? Feeling Zhuowen's burning gaze, the rock giant cursed in his heart. After this guy refined his 4 limbs, is he eyeing his remaining body? However, the rock giant answered Zhuowen cautiously, they have been summoned. They are not far from here, but the headless statue's light source is too bright, so they don't dare to come close. Zhuowen resisted the urge to attack the rock giant and put away the headless statue. This rock giant was very useful to him, so he didn't plan to kill him. Once again, the surroundings fell into darkness. Then, Zhuowen noticed several terrifying black shadows rushing out from the surrounding rocks. There were close to 100 of these black shadows, and all of them were peak warrior-level evil spirits. These evil spirits stared greedily at Zhuowen. If it weren't for the rock giant suppressing them with his momentum, they would have already rushed up to Zhuowen and devoured him. Well done. Zhuowen nodded his head in satisfaction. He then charged into the group of evil spirits and attacked them with his hands and feet. Majestic grand mist god force flowed out from his body like a long river and revolved around him. Every time he reached the evil spirits, this long river seemed to have gained intelligence, and it would wrap around the evil spirits and refine them. These evil spirits were restless, but under the pressure of the giant stone man, they did not dare to move. Therefore, Zhuowen was able to easily capture and refine the evil spirits as if they were toys in his hands. When Zhuowen finished refining the last evil spirit, he suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. His roar was filled with carefreeness. After refining close to 100 peak warrior-level evil spirits, Huang Xiaolong's accumulation of energy was finally enough, and he successfully broke through to the next realm. Muffled thunderous sounds could be heard coming from his body. They were continuous and unending, and they were getting louder and louder. Rumble. A heavy sound that seemed to have been suppressed for a long time broke out from Zhuowen's body, and Zhuowen's cultivation rose steadily, breaking through the shackles and climbing to a new realm. The 5 elements ring appeared behind him again. The 5 elements ring's volume expanded by several times, and it spun rapidly. The 5 elements ring revealed 5 different colors, and shot out in all directions. He had successfully advanced to the late 5 elements transformation stage, and his strength had almost doubled. The rock giant looked at the huge 5 elements ring floating behind him, and his aura spread out like the sea, and he was even more shocked. If he wasn't wrong, this guy's cultivation was only at the late 5 elements transformation stage, but his aura was so vast that it far exceeded that of a 5 elements transformation stage cultivator. There were even many yin-yang transformation stage cultivators whose auras were not as strong as this young man in front of him. Mother **I've really kicked an iron plate this time. This guy is simply a monster. Not only is his exorcism power terrifying, but his strength is also abnormally terrifying. Chapter 3909. Zhuowen's eyes sparkled. The huge 5-element ring turned into a 5-colored stream and flowed back into Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's aura was many times stronger than before. It was like a huge mountain, lofty and unapproachable. Zhuowen looked at the sky and found that the surrounding darkness was gradually dispersing. He knew that dawn was coming. Human, I have done what you said. You should let me go now, right? The rock giant looked at Zhuowen with fear and asked carefully. He was still worried that Zhuowen would go back on his words. After all, his current state was too bad. If Zhuowen wanted to kill him, he would not be able to resist. Don't worry, I promised that I would not kill you. I will definitely not attack you, Zhuowen said with a smile. The rock giant became more and more vigilant. Every time this human smiled like that, it would not be good for him. Then you should let me go, right? The rock giant said as he slowly floated up. He stared at Zhuowen and tentatively took a few steps back. However, the moment he took a step back, a purple gold divine sword suddenly swept over and pierced his body. The rock giant cried out in pain. The rock giant was shocked and angry at the same time as he shouted in a deep voice. I said that I would not kill you, but I did not say that I would let you go. Zhuowen's smile became more and more brilliant. The rock giant trembled. It was this kind of smile. The last time this human showed such a brilliant smile, his 4 limbs had been cut off by him. You don't have to be so nervous. For the next 20 days, you will stay in my macro world. There are some things that I need to ask you. After 20 days have passed, I will immediately release you. Zhuowen said calmly. The rock giant secretly complained. This guy did not intend to let him go so easily. However, the rock giant was glad that the human had only imprisoned him for 20 days and not for his entire life. Otherwise, he would rather die than submit to the rock giant. What is your name? Zhuowen asked casually. My name is Allah. The rock giant had already accepted his fate and was very cooperative. Zhuowen nodded and asked, Allah, you're a human-level evil spirit after all. You should be familiar with the distribution of evil spirits in this small world, right? Allah looked at Zhuowen with vigilance and asked in a deep voice, what do you want? Zhuowen grinned, revealing an extremely bright smile, and said, I just want to ask you to do me a small favor. Tell me the specific location of some warrior-level evil spirits. If you do it well, I can actually help you restore your limbs. How about it? Allah looked at Zhuowen in amazement. He did not expect that this human in front of him could actually help him restore his limbs. He could not help but feel a little moved. Warrior-level evil spirits had a clear sense of territory. Many warrior-level evil spirits would often invade the territories of other warrior-level evil spirits in order to expand their territories. Allah had been invaded by many other cultivator-level evil spirits and had a lot of grudges with them. If he could lead this kid to his enemies, wouldn't that be great? Thinking of this, Allah revealed a rather wretched smile and readily agreed. It's going to be daybreak soon. You can enter my big world first. Zhuowen said to Allah as he looked at the sky that was gradually turning white. Allah thought for a moment and did not refuse. He was taken into Zhuowen's big world. When the sky was completely bright, Zhuowen carried the headless idol back to the palace in the Great Rift Valley. However, when he returned to the palace, he found that there were many cracks on the surface of the palace, as if it had been destroyed by some kind of power. Li Xinbing, Mai Yuanxi, and the others were outside the palace, as if they were waiting for someone. When Zhuowen returned, they all gathered around him. What happened? Zhuowen pointed at the cracks on the palace and asked in astonishment. Li Xinbing smiled bitterly and said, Brother Dawen, you don't know this, but the darkness in this small world is getting more and more terrifying. The evil spirits that appear are also getting stronger and stronger. Yesterday, one of the evil spirits broke through the light and attacked the palace. If it wasn't for the headless idol suddenly emitting an even brighter light, we might have died last night. Mai Yuanxi nodded in agreement. Zhuowen looked at Ziling and saw her nod. He knew that Li Xinbing and Mai Yuanxi were telling the truth. Are you saying that you want me to hand over the headless idol in my hands? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Li Xinbing and my Yuanxi's hearts skipped a beat. They quickly waved their hands and refused. Brother Dao Wen, you've misunderstood. We don't mean that. What we mean is that we should take the initiative to snatch the headless idol. Zhuowen thought for a moment. Although he did not stay in the palace at night, Ziling was still there. If the palace was breached, Ziling would die with it. Although Zhuowen knew that Li Xinbing and my Yuanxi were using him, he really did not have a better way to ensure Ziling's safety. How many palaces are left? Zhuowen asked. Li Xinbing quickly said, there are about 60 palaces left. We've already investigated them. The closest palace to us is about 10,000 miles northwest of the Great Rift Valley. The ones occupying that palace are from Eternal Loyalty State. The strongest among them is called Lin Hu. He's already at the pinnacle of the 5 elements transformation state. Zhuowen gave Li Xinbing a deep look. This woman's investigation was really thorough. It seemed that she had long been interested in that palace. Zhuowen did not pursue the matter. He nodded and said, Li Xinbing, my Yuanxi, the two of you can come with me. Li Xinbing frowned. But when she thought of Zhuowen's strength, a look of relief appeared on her face. The short youth from before was also at the pinnacle of the 5 elements transformation state. But he was easily defeated by Zhuowen. In her opinion, Zhuowen's strength should be close to the early stage of the yin-yang transformation state. It should be enough to take down Lin Hu. About an hour later, the 3 of them arrived at a place about 10,000 miles northwest of the Great Rift Valley. It was a lush black forest. The black forest was extremely large. It was at least 1,000,000 miles wide. In the middle of the black forest stood a palace. Is that the palace? Zhuowen pointed at the palace in the middle of the forest and asked Li Xinbing. Yes, let's go. Li Xinbing nodded. However, Zhuowen stopped Li Xinbing. The latter looked at Zhuowen suspiciously. Someone's coming. Zhuowen looked at the horizon. There was a stream of light coming at them at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, the stream of light appeared above the black forest. Only then did the 3 of them see that it was a huge divine ship in front of them. This divine ship landed in the open space in front of the temple in the forest with familiarity, and a group of people walked down from it. When Zhuowen saw the leader of the group, his eyes narrowed and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He happened to know this group of people. It was Ku Xinjue and the others from the Wukong state. Chapter 39:10. Zhuowen and the other 2 quietly entered the Black Forest. Not long after, they arrived at the center of the Black Forest. They hid behind the bushes and retracted their auras. Through the gaps in the bushes, they looked at the palace in front of them. At this moment, the 2 sides were clearly in a dispute. The dignified youth was naturally the leader of this palace, Lin Hu. He looked at Ku Xinjue with an unfriendly expression and said, This brother must be Ku Xinjue from the Wukong state. I am Lin Hu from the Yongzhong state. May I know why you are here? Ku Xinjue grinned and said, Brother Lin, are you joking? Can't you guess why we're here? Li Miao, who was standing beside Ku Xinjue, said impatiently, Lin Hu, I'll give you a chance. Hand over the palace and we won't harm a single hair on your head. Lin Hu's expression changed slightly as he looked coldly at Li Miao. Just as he was about to speak, Li Miao suddenly released a powerful aura. Lin Hu was silent. Li Miao's aura was extremely vast and was not any weaker than his. He also knew that Li Miao was at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage like him. And from Li Miao's performance standing behind Ku Xinjue, it could be seen that Li Miao was definitely not the strongest in this group. The strongest should be Ku Xinjue. He guessed that Ku Xinjue was at least at the yin-yang transformation stage. This kind of lineup was much stronger than theirs. Lin Hu also knew that if they continued to struggle, they would definitely be wiped out by Ku Xinjue's group. Of course, if Brother Ling Hu knows what's good for you and you submit to me and become our vassal, then maybe we can accept you as one of our team members, Ku Xinjue suddenly said. Lin, whose cultivation was not weak and was not inferior to Li Miao and Liu Hong. This was a talent, and Ku Xinjue did not want to let him go. Li Miao whispered to Ku Xinjue, "Senior Ku, the space in each palace is limited and we're already full. How are we going to recruit Lin Hu?" Ku Xinjue glanced at Su Rong and the other two and said calmly, "I said before that my team does not need trash. It's time to clear out some trash and let brother Lin Hu join us." Hearing this, Li Miao instantly understood and looked at Su Rong's group of three with ill intentions. Su Rong and the other two's faces were deathly pale. Ku Xinjue's voice didn't avoid them, so the three of them clearly heard the conversation between Ku Xinjue and Li Miao. Su Rong forced a smile and said, "Senior brother Li Miao, you guys are joking, right? We are all cultivators of the Wukong State region. We should help each other out." "Helping each other? The three of you have such trashy cultivation, what ability do you have to help us? You're just three burdens in our team." Su Rong and the other two turned even paler. They lowered their heads and remained silent. Li Miao was right. Their strength was too weak. They had no right to speak in this group. Ku Xinjue did not even look at Su Rong and the other two as he looked towards Lin Hu and said, "Our team still has 4 vacancies. If brother Lin Hu agrees to join us, we do not mind helping you pass this trial." Lin Hu's eyes flickered, revealing a look of interest. He looked at his companions behind him and gritted his teeth. "I still have a few friends, can you?" Ku Xinjue shook his head and said, "Brother Lin Hu, our team doesn't have many vacancies. Accepting you is already my biggest concession. Other than you, I won't accept anyone else." Lin Hu was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "I'll join your team." As he spoke, Lin Hu walked straight behind Ku Xinjue and calmly looked at his eternal loyalty state companions who didn't know what to do. "All of you scram, otherwise, I'll deal with you," Ku Xinjue said coldly to the other eternal loyalty state cultivators. Everyone from eternal loyalty state revealed a look of anger, but feeling the terrifying aura released from Ku Xinjue's body, they dared to be angry but did not dare to say anything. Helpless, they could only leave this place. "The three of you are still not scramming?" Ku Xinjue saw that Su Rong and the other two actually didn't leave. His gaze turned cold and his tone became very impolite. Su Rong and the other two's faces turned pale. Su Rong said unwillingly, "Senior brother Ku, please take us with you. After all, we are all cultivators of the Wukong state. Don't worry, we will definitely not take up any space. We just need to leave a little space in the corner. The three of us can squeeze in, we won't give you any space. We won't trouble you." Ku Xinjue didn't say anything else, but gave Li Miao a look. Li Miao grinned. He stepped in front of Su Rong, grabbed him by the collar, and then ruthlessly threw him out. Su Rong crashed into many thick trees before falling to the ground, creating a huge crater. He spat out a mouthful of blood and violently twitched on the ground. The other two people retreated and looked at Li Miao in horror. "Li Miao, back then you told me that if we left Dao Wen and joined your team, you would guarantee that we would pass this trial. Could it be that your words were all nonsense?" Su Rong struggled to stand up and said angrily. Li Miao grinned and said, "You really are an idiot. This was just my plan to sow discord. I just wanted to let Dao Wen have a taste of being betrayed by everyone, trash like you. If it wasn't for revenge on Dao Wen, do you think I would bother to rope you in? I have to say, you don't even have the self-awareness of being trash." Su Rong's face was pale, and his eyes were filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would have firmly followed Zhuowen. Although Zhuowen's strength was not as good as Ku Xinjue's, and there was a high possibility that he would die in the trial. However, Zhuowen at least treated them as companions, and not like Ku Xinjue and Li Miao, who only treated them as clowns that could be thrown away and humiliated at any time. The other two quickly ran to Su Rong's side and helped him up. They advised, "Senior brother Su, let's go." Su Rong swallowed a few mouthfuls of bloody phlegm, looked at Li Miao with resentment, and planned to leave with the other two. "Trash, you dare to glare at me? I think you don't want to live anymore. Don't even think about leaving today. Hurry up and die here." Li Miao's eyes revealed an ominous glint. He actually did not plan to let Su Rong and the other two go. Like a wild beast, He charged towards Su Rong and the other two. Li Miao, Yu, Su Rong and the other two were shocked. Ku Xinjue had clearly planned to let them go, but Li Miao actually wanted to kill them. Wasn't this too much? The instant Li Miao was about to charge in front of Su Rong and the other two figures suddenly rushed out from the bushes and blocked Li Miao's path. Boom! 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 The three of them collided, and terrifying energy ripples erupted. Li Miao frowned and couldn't help but retreat a few steps. As for the two figures, they retreated more than 10 steps before stabilizing themselves. Who are the two of you? Li Miao couldn't help but frown when he saw that it was a man and a woman who blocked him. Moreover, they were both in the late stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. Chapter 39:11. Li Xinbing and my UNC retreated to a spot not too far away from Su Rong and the other two. Li Miao was even stronger than the short youth from before. They had only exchanged a single blow and they had already suffered minor injuries. Thank you for saving me, fellow Taoist. Su Rong forced himself to bow to Li Xinbing and my UNC. His eyes were filled with gratitude. Li Xinbing said expressionlessly, "We were also entrusted by someone. Otherwise, we wouldn't have taken such a huge risk to save the three of you." Su Rong was puzzled. He didn't know who the two of them had entrusted to save them. He remembered that he didn't know anyone at the late stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. Ku Xinjue furrowed his brows as he looked at Li Xinbing and my UNC. His eyes lit up as he said, "My two friends, your strength is not bad. If you are willing to join my team, I can help you pass this test." As he spoke, Ku Xinjue walked in front of Li Miao. A terrifying aura erupted from him as black and white energy surged out from his body. They transformed into a huge yin-yang diagram that rotated above his head. Li Xinbing and my UNC were shocked. Their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. They didn't expect that the leader of this team would be a yin-yang transformation stage expert. It was no wonder that Li Miao, a pinnacle 5 elements transformation stage expert, would listen to this youth. Li Xinbing and my UNC looked at each other with worry. They doubted that Zhuoan would be a match for Ku Xinjue. Ku Xinjue sensed Li Xinbing and MIUNC's nervousness and a smug smile appeared on his face as he continued, "I'm sure the two of you have seen through my cultivation. With my cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult for me to bring you through this trial." Li Xinbing and my UNC were both tempted by the offer. Although there were many geniuses participating in this test, there were very few who had reached the yin-yang transformation stage and above. They were known as the seeded contestants and would definitely pass the test. If they joined Ku Xinjue's team, the chances of them passing the test were very high. Behind the bushes, Zhuowen silently looked at the hesitant Li Xinbing and MIUNC. His lips curled into a sneer. He was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he waited for Li Xinbing and my UNC to make a decision. If they chose him in the end, Zhuowen would treat them as true companions and help them pass this trial. Of course, if they chose Ku Xinjue, Zhuowen would not show any mercy. After a moment of hesitation, my UNC suddenly walked towards Ku Xinjue. "Senior Marshal Brother, my name is my UNC and I come from the elimination region. May I know Senior Brother's name?" My UNC approached Ku Xinjue with a fawning smile. Ku Xinjue patted MIUNC's shoulder and laughed. "Good. Brother MI, you've made the right choice. This choice will allow you to pass this trial. I'm Ku Xinjue from Wukong State. You can just call me Senior Brother Ku." My UNC was shocked. His eyes flickered as he said subconsciously, "I didn't expect Senior Brother Ku to be from Wukong State as well." Ku Xinjue's eyes flashed coldly as he asked in surprise, "Could it be that Junior Marshal Brother MI has met other cultivators from Wukong State?" My UNC nodded and explained the situation of Zhuowen and Ziling. He also pointed out that Zhuowen was hiding behind the bushes. "Hehe, this Dao Wen seems to be quite capable. He actually managed to snatch a palace from you." Ku Xinjue's gaze fell on the bushes as he said this. He sneered, "Dao Wen, come out and face your death. How long are you going to be a coward?" Li Miao and Liu Hong looked at the bushes with unfriendly gazes. Su Rong and the other two were pleasantly surprised. They knew that Li Xinbing and Mai Yuanxi were Zhuowen's companions. They guessed that Zhuowen was planning to save them. However, when they thought of how strong Ku Xinjue and the others were, they were extremely worried. They felt that Zhuowen was not a match for Ku Xinjue and the others. A rustling sound came from the bushes. Then, a figure slowly walked out from the bushes. When Li Miao saw the figure, his lips curled into a cruel smile. Dao Wen, it really is you. You only know how to hide your head and tail. Zhuowen's gaze was calm. He did not even look at Li Miao. Instead, he looked at Li Xinbing, who was still hesitating. Junior Marshal Sister Li, it's your turn to make the decision. Do you plan to join Ku Xinjue or stay in my team? Zhuowen said indifferently. Li Xinbing bit down on her lower lip. She looked at Zhuowen's calm eyes and suddenly thought of Zhuowen's previous actions. She gritted her teeth and silently walked to Zhuowen's side. Ku Xinjue and the others were surprised. They did not expect Li Xinbing to choose Zhuowen. Was she blind? Mai Yuanxi was also in disbelief. He quickly advised, Junior Marshal Sister Li, Dao Wen is not a good person. No matter how strong he is, can he be stronger than a yin-yang transformation stage cultivator? Moreover, Senior Marshal Brother Ku's team is so strong. You. Li Xinbing shook her head. Senior Marshal Brother Mai, you saw what Ku Xinjue did. He can abandon his companions as he pleases. If I'm useless to him, maybe he'll abandon me halfway through the journey. Besides, other than me, I have my own companions. I will not abandon my companions and leave alone. Ku Xinjue's face suddenly became gloomy. Li Xinbing's words just happened to poke at his sore spot, and he was very angry. Since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame us for killing you too. Ku Xinjue snorted and looked at Li Miao. Li Miao understood and strode towards Zhuowen. The aura around him became more and more terrifying. Mai Yuanxi's eyes flashed. He wanted to remind Ku Xinjue that Zhuowen was very strong. He had once killed a 5 elements transformation stage cultivator. Li Miao might not be able to deal with Zhuowen. However, Ku Xinjue waved his hand and interrupted Mai Yuanxi. Instead, he stared coldly at Zhuowen. He wanted to see Zhuowen being torn to shreds by Li Miao with his own eyes. Die. You piece of trash. Li Miao laughed and stepped in front of Zhuowen. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched towards Zhuowen's face. A huge 5 elements ring appeared behind Li Miao. The 5 elements ring flowed with the terrifying power of the 5 elements, causing the power of his punch to become even more terrifying. Zhuowen slowly stood where he was and watched as the fist came closer and closer. His eyes were filled with ridicule. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.